Alexis Turner? Alexis Turner? Is Alexis Turner in the room? Alexis Turner? Anybody? Alexis Turner?
The hour of 6:30 having come and gone, I will call to order the Common Council meeting of Tuesday, August 6th, 2024, and ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Thank you. Alder Knox. It's just there a moment ago.
He's
Alder
there.
Knox indicates present. Alder Latimer Burris.
Here.
Alder Latimer Burris is present. Alder Madison.
Here.
Alder Madison is present. Alder Martinez Rutherford.
Present.
Alder Martinez Rutherford is present. Alder Miadze. Alder Miadze is present. Alder Rummel.
Present.
Rummel is present. Alder Tischler is excused. Alder Revere.
Here.
Alder Revere is present. Alder Vitiver will be joining us soon. Alder Wahelia.
Present.
Wahelia is present. Alder Bennett. Alder Bennett is present. Alder Conklin.
Present.
Alder Conklin is present. Alder Curry.
Here.
Alder Curry is present. Alder Duncan.
Present.
Alder Duncan is present. Alder Evers.
Here.
Alder Evers is present. Alder Field. Alder Field is present. Alder Figueroa Cole. Alder Figueroa Cole is present. Alder Govindarajan. Alder Govindarajan is present. Alder Ugair. Alder Ugair is present. Alder Harrington McKinney.
I'm present, and let the record show that my camera will be off because of medical reasons.
Understood. Thank you. Alder Harrington McKinney is present. Madam Mayor, we have quorum.
Thank you. I want to take a moment under opening remarks. First of all, just to remind us that we are all here to do the business of the people of Madison, and I ask that we try and do that with kindness and grace, and that in particular, whoever you may be as you speak, please refrain from using any profanity and be respectful of the other humans in the room. I also want to take a moment to welcome our new Planning Division Director, Megan Tuttle, who is here with us for the first time. And I want to publicly thank Bill Fruling, who has been the interim Planning Division Director for these months in the transition time. So I hope the council and the community will take the opportunity to welcome Megan and to get to know her as she steps into this new role here in Madison and at the city. So thank you for being here tonight. All right, our first order of business is honoring resolutions, and tonight we have a special one. It's Legistar 84391, expressing appreciation for the services and dedication of Assistant Fire Chief Chief Stedman. And I believe Alder Curry is starting. Alder Curry?
I am. Thank you, Mayor. Whereas Assistant Fire Chief Chief Stedman started with the Madison Fire Department on September 9th, 1996, and retired on July 5th, 2024, after more than 27 years of dedicated service to our community. And whereas he began his fire service career in the Wisconsin Air National Guard in 1992, serving 21 years and retiring as a Chief Master Sergeant. And whereas he is a combat veteran with 2 tours of duty in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom, and whereas he holds a master's degree in rehabilitation psychology from UW-Madison and is a IFSAC Fire Instructor 2 and Fire Officer 4, and whereas he began his MFD career as a firefighter EMT at Fire Station 8 on Lean Road on the B shift, and
he was reclassified to firefighter paramedic 1999 and firefighter paramedic 2 in 2006, and whereas he was promoted to fire lieutenant in 2011, and whereas he was promoted to fire division chief of medical affairs in 2013, and whereas he was promoted to fire assistant chief in 2017, assigned to personnel, and then in 2019 was assigned to medical operations, and
he was instrumental in developing and launching the City of Madison's first community paramedic program. And whereas, as Assistant Chief of Medical Operations, he led the implementation of the Community Alternative Response Emergency Services, CARES program, as we call it, which began service on September 1, 2021, a vital resource for behavioral health emergencies in our community. And whereas, under his management and supervision, the CARES program has been incredibly successful and has expanded to add a second team in July of 2022 and a third team in April of 2024. having responded to well over 5,000 calls for service in just under 3 years since its launch. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the mayor and the common council express their appreciation for the service and dedication that Assistant Fire Chief Stedman gave to our community during his 27 years of service to the city of Madison. Be it further resolved that the mayor and the common council express that Assistant Fire Chief Shay Stedman will be missed and wish him the best with his retirement from the City of Madison Fire Department.
Thank you, Alders. We'll take that as moved by Alder Curry and seconded by President Figueroa Cole. We do have one person wishing to speak on this item from the public, Mary Batari of District 6.
Hi there. I'll make this quick. I had the honor of working with Che for many years, and I wanted to say our city employees are awesome. They work really hard every day. They take on added responsibilities all the time, but it is a rare occurrence where we import an entirely different job description into someone's job description and say, yay, isn't this exciting? And we did that with Che. He was the Assistant Medical Affairs Chief for the fire department. He had a very big job during the pandemic. He was out there trying to get PPE for the fire department and all the rest of us. He was working to keep the fire department safe, and he did. We didn't have any serious injuries or deaths during this time, and so he was doing some really important stuff. And the mayor decided, in the middle of all this, to say, we'd like to start the CARES program now, please, Che, and will you help us with that? And he did it with great energy. He did a brilliant job. He did multiple public meetings. He did multiple private meetings with counselors and other folks who knew about this. He took our calls all the time. He took calls from the Common Council, which was very, very supportive of the entire program, and has personally encountered people on the street who have benefited from the program, so we've heard lots of good stories back. So I couldn't let the opportunity pass to thank Che as just an exemplary city employee. We couldn't have done it without him.
Thank you. So now we'll welcome up Assistant Chief Stedman and the alders to present the proclamation, please, or the resolution, please, and for a brief photo opportunity.
This.
Oh my God.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you both very much. I really appreciate it so much.
It's been wonderful working with you.
We're going to miss you.
I appreciate it. I'm going to miss you.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll be brief because I understand we have a pretty busy evening ahead of us. I just want to say, I felt incredibly lucky when I got hired in 1996. I've been incredibly proud every year since to work for the city of Madison. In the fire department, we don't acknowledge individuals very often just because of the team nature of the work that we do. So I certainly have to take a moment to say that I did nothing alone. I walked on people's shoulders often, confided in a lot of people that I trusted, and I've worked with a great team. The one good thing about retirement is that you can speak frankly about things without really repercussions. So Mayor Satya, it was an honor to work for you. And with you, you lead with humility and compassion, and this Common Council works its butt off all the time and cares a lot about the citizens in Madison, and it's been an honor to work with all of you. So I'm a little overwhelmed by the words that were said, to be honest, but we're just one big family, and keep up the good work, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Che. It's been an honor to work with you as well, and I am, most of what I would have said has been said already, but I am really incredibly grateful for the work that Shay did to stand up the CARES program, but also just in the normal course of his duties. And keeping the fire department going is something that takes large number of people, and not all of them rise to the level of assistant chief, but I'm very appreciative of the work that Shay did day in and day out for every one of those 27 years. So thank you and congratulations, and enjoy your very well-earned retirement. All right, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any objection to recording an enthusiastic unanimous vote in favor of the honoring resolution? Seeing no objection, we'll record that vote, and congratulations and good luck in the rest of your retirement, Shay. All right, and let the record show that the members of Local 311 were in fact here to celebrate. That brings us to disclosures and recusals. Are there any disclosures or recusals on tonight's agenda? Alder Field.
Thank you, Mayor. On item 18, I'm a UW-Madison employee, so I wanted to disclose that. It will not affect my vote.
Thank you, Alder. That will be noted. Are there any additional disclosures or recusals on tonight's agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on then to the presentation of the consent agenda. President Figueroa Cole.
Thank you, Mayor. A consent agenda is moved with the recommended action listed for each item on the agenda, including public hearings, except 1, items which have registrants wishing to speak, 2, items which alders have separated out for discussion or debate purposes. This document lists supermajority items, agenda items with recommendations different from the agenda, items for exclusion, items introduced from the floor, and agenda items with corrections. Agenda items that are supermajority items, the supermajority vote items will be recorded as unanimous votes unless a roll call or exclusion is requested. Legistar File 84-642, report of the mayor submitting resident committee appointments to the Ethics Board and Police and Fire Commission, presented by the mayor, and requires 14 votes. Legistar File 84-505, supporting the implementation of the City Madison anti-bullying policy, presented by the President of the Common Council, requires 14 votes. Legistar Item 84-340, awarding Public Works Contract 9502, Warner Park Community Recreation Center, and amending the 2024 adopted capital budget for Parks Divisions and Engineer Facilities Divisions to complete the project. Report for the Finance Committee to adopt and requires 15 votes. Legistar 84-360 is a substitute authorizing the issuance and establishing the parameters for the sale of not to exceed $108,500,000 general obligation promissory notes of the City of Madison, Wisconsin, and directing the final approval of the terms therefore an amendment to the 2024 water utility capital budget. 15 votes required. And finance report for same for adoption. Legistar Item 84-378, amending the 2024 adopted operating budget to transfer funds within agency budgets based on projected spending through the second quarter of 2024, appropriated $545,000 from the general fund on assigned balance, $32,593 from the library on assigned balance, and amend the 2024 capital budget to transfer funds across projects and update funding sources. 15 votes required. Agenda items with recommendations different from the agenda. Legistar File 84-161, public hearing for a new license, Consolidated Management Company at 1000 Edgewood College Drive, Agent Michael DeLeese, for a Class B combination liquor license. Report from the License Committee is to re-refer to the Liquor License Committee for 8/21 and back to the Common Council on September 10, 2024. Legislative item 83420, adopting the sustainability plan update and directing staff to implement the recommendations in the plan. Report of the Sustainability Madison Committee is to recommended action is to adopt by council with the following recommendations. Sustainable Madison Committee recommended adoption of the sustainability plan with the addition of a safe routes to school element to goal number 12 as recommended by the Transportation Committee and changes to actions 6.4, 9.2, 9.3, and 17.5 suggested by the staff. Agenda item 83601 is a substitute amending the section 27.05 of the Madison General Ordinance to refine loan and property maintenance provisions. Report of the Sustainability Madison Committee and the Alder Figueroa recommended action is to adopt the second substitute that was emailed to alders earlier today. And it's already in Legistar. Agenda items excluded because of requests of alders or speakers registered by noon on August 6th. Agenda Legistar number 84443, authorizing the scheduling of a referendum relating to the exceeding the municipal property tax limit in the city of Madison. There are speakers registered. Agenda item 69, or 84, Legistar file 84572, the Chief of Police second quarter report. There's registers, there's speaker registers. And then we have an item introduced from the floor, 84703, and it's a by title only, amending section 12.80 of the Madison General Ordinance to clarify and increase the use of flashing lights by school buses. And Mayor, I'm sorry, I just realized that I didn't have the dates for return on that one, but I will try to figure that out. So let me see if that's in the mail that we received real quick. Oh, I found it. So it is referred to the Transportation Committee on September 4 and back to council on, I saw it here somewhere, September 10. Thank you.
All right, thank you, President Figueroa Cole. Are there additional items that alders would like to have excluded from the consent agenda at this time? Seeing none, then let me just go through that one more time. Items 25 and 28 are supermajority items requiring 14 votes. Items 61, 63, and 67 require 15 votes. Item 13, the recommendation is to re-refer to the ALRC on 8/21 and back to council on 9/10. Item 82, the recommendation is to adopt with recommendations as detailed. Item 83, the recommendation is to adopt the second substitute. We'll be excluding items 68 and 69, and we're introducing Legistar 84703 and referring that to transportation on 9/4 and back to council on 9/10. Good? Good. All right, then on the consent agenda, President Figueroa Cole?
Move to adopt.
Is there a second? Moved and seconded to adopt the consent agenda. Is there any objection to recording a unanimous vote in favor? Seeing no objection, the consent agenda and all items on it are adopted. All right, so that will take us then to public comment. President Figueroa Cole?
Mayor, is it possible to, if you're okay with the body, to take comments for item 69 first, since MPD is kind of busy on their activities today and want to make sure that they're not here waiting?
Yes. Is there any objection to taking public comment on item 69 first? Seeing no objection, we'll do that. Thank you, President Figueroa Cole. So then on item 69, we have one registrant. So item 69 is the Chief of Police second quarter report. We have one registrant wishing to speak, Chandra Osterhaus of District 19. Do we have Chandra?
Hello?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, I'm not a member of the police department or anything, but when I read the report, there was one section that I had some concerns about and whether or not it's too late to change this. I thought it was really important to look at it. So when reading it, I found that there was under the section for reporting procedures and reporting reviews, there's a section that says, it actually really caught my attention. Okay, it says it's useful reports must be, reports must be useful to persons other than the writer and should be a word picture about what occurred. And the reason that concerned me after reading the entire part of it, and I think that it's absolutely great that we're doing standardized reporting, that's wonderful. However, if there's like some very vague information above that on content, and if we're going to be going down that road, maybe there's a more detailed description, but a word picture to me is actually like a piece of art made out of words. I'm not trying to make anybody feel bad by saying that, but like, I don't want a novel and I don't want a word picture. I want clear, concise, complete, and correct documentation from police officers in their reports. Personally, I would like non-biased language, objective language, concrete language, non-judgmental language, but I don't want, a word picture. So that was the one part that I wanted to address, because that can change it changes everything for one person if that report goes to someone else and they're using subjective language and they're trying to create this description of what happened and it's just their perspective. That was all I had to say about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the registrant? Seeing none, then we will go to item 68, which is authorizing the scheduling of a referendum relating to exceeding the municipal property tax limits in the city of Madison. Our first registrant is Nicholas, I'm sorry, Nick, Pevich of District 12, to be followed by Adam Nelson, to be followed by Greg Patme. Nick?
Thank you, everyone. As chair of the Madison Arts Commission, I could spend time to address the utter gut punch of reading about a potential future with even less dollars supporting our local arts and cultural sector if our granting program goes away. But as the first speaker of the evening, hooray for registering this past Friday at 3:21 in the afternoon, I instead plan to address you, the Common Council, as the elected individuals representing everyone in the city, but more importantly, as human beings. I personally have no question that the referendum question will be added to November's ballot in 2 weeks. I have no idea what anyone else plans to comment this evening, but in this moment, I want you to ground yourself in a few things. Navigating change, let alone disagreement, conflict, is so difficult. I know that I'm not saying anything really unique or special or new, but I want you to remember these facts as you navigate tonight as well as in the coming months. You met as a committee of the whole to discuss what your body's values were and how we as a community with you as our elected officials wanted to move forward understanding this structural deficit months and months ago, earlier than any time the budget has ever been discussed, from my understanding. You, as the body, provided guidance to the mayor's office and staff about your shared values with a guiding resolution in which helped guide the decision-making process of asking for proposed agency requests with a 5% cut, as well as what the future could look like, understanding a referendum might be on the ballot. You all are extremely intelligent, and there's a draft plan to address the structural deficit in the near term, given all the state level politics outside of your control, outside of your direct control. You all care about Madison and the people who call it home. You have all worked together for the last year, and even when you've had your disagreements, you can have strength in knowing each other as colleagues and maybe as friends. And you can also find strength in yourself as individuals who were voted to lead in this moment. I don't envy you one bit, but I want you to know that there are people who understand the predicament that you are attempting to navigate our community through and who are supportive of the difficult decisions you'll have to make in the near future. You are all helping shape the kind of community we all call home. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next registrant is Adam Nelson of District 5, to be followed by Greg Patme, to be followed by James Ganther. Adam? Do we have Adam online?
Hi there, joining virtually. And I'm so sorry.
Oh, I think you might have muted yourself again. Are you there, Adam? We show you as unmuted on our end. Is it a microphone issue? All right, Adam, we're going to come back to you. So then next up is Greg Patme of District 7, to be followed by James Ganther, to be followed by Daniel Rolfs. Greg? Do we have Greg on Zoom?
Mayor, I'm not seeing Greg.
Okay. So then we'll go to James Ganther of District 20, to be followed by Daniel Rolfs, to be followed by Noah Lieberman. James?
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Yes, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I want to express my opposition to the proposed referendum. I think the city of Madison already spends way too much in money. Just last year, there was a $23 million increase to the operating budget. I have seen no attempt whatsoever, serious attempt to accommodate, to reduce the budget whatsoever, or to look into any area where there might be fat or unnecessary administrative load. I took a look through the budget before calling in today, and frankly, I see a lot of excessive spending, starting with the mayor's office. There are 5 deputy mayors and 2 sustainability coordinators in the mayor's office. That seems an awful lot of high-level bureaucracy that really doesn't provide a lot of value to the city of Madison. I just think that that's an area where we can cut staff and reduce administrative load, for one thing. Secondly, I see a lot of construction going around Madison right now. A lot of it's related to the bus rapid transit system. This is costing the city of Madison an awful lot of money, and it's causing an awful lot of traffic disruption, and it's just completely unnecessary. So I respectfully ask the city to stop further spending on this. It's just simply not needed in Madison. The north-south BRT line should be canceled, and no more spending should be made on the BRT. It is just simply a gigantic waste of money for Madison taxpayers. I would also like to point out that city staff have received a 6% pay raise in 2024. That is much higher than many other employees, workers within the Madison community. State workers and UW workers have received a 2% pay raise this year. City of Madison has received 6%. So you're asking people that have received a far lower pay raise to finance higher pay raises for city employees. That is just fundamentally wrong and unfair to other workers in the city of Madison. Another point, Madison rents are already sky high. You are going to increase them even more by increasing the amount of property taxes that landlords have to pay to the city of Madison. This is going to be reflected in renters' rent. It's just going to keep skyrocketing rent increases keep going higher and higher and higher, and the city is going to exacerbate them if it passes this referendum. Okay, you say you don't have a lot of money from the state. Well, you received $3.1 million increase in shared revenue in 2024. You're getting more money now, yet you complain it's not enough.
You have about 30 seconds
I
left.
understand you'd like more revenue from the state, but nonetheless, you are getting more money. You're not getting less in shared revenue from the state of Wisconsin, yet you are asking for more money from property taxpayers. Frankly, I just see a lot of wasted spending by the city of Madison. Streets department is making a lot more traffic congestion through all the construction that's going on right now. You're making seems like a lot of that's totally unnecessary.
Thank you. That's your time.
Traffic congestion.
Let's go back and see if we can get Adam Nelson to unmute successfully.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yes, thank you. I'm in a hotel and the internet is terrible here. Okay. So I just wanted to say, my name's Adam. I'm a resident here in Madison. And just start by saying, as sensitive as this topic is for the community, thank you for doing everything possible, Council, for providing visibility into this problem that you're hoping the referendum will solve, for hosting this forum to discuss it. I think, the main thing that I just want to convey is that I think we're pretty clear on what happens if the referendum doesn't pass. One thing that I kind of want to piggyback on from the last speaker is that there are some downsides if the referendum ends up passing that I just want to make sure voters are aware of. And, that is we have to zoom out and realize that this isn't the only property tax increase being proposed on the November ballot. I'm talking about the $600 million that the school board's also asking for. And, what happens if they all pass? And I think it's important that folks are just aware that, again, what the last speaker said, that there will be impact to renters. There's Isabel Cohen is a economics professor here at the University of Washington. I say here because I'm traveling for work in Seattle right now. She's tracked data on this for some time. There's multiple studies on this, and the estimate is that roughly 60% of increases to property taxes are passed on to renters. So it's not just a homeowner impact. That's purely just for information, just FYI for folks that are thinking of voting on this, that property taxes are baked into your rent. And then obviously there's impact to the homeowners. We're looking at, I think, over $100 a month potential increases if all of these referendums pass by the time we get to 2026. And then I noticed in the PowerPoint presentation that was presented, there's also special charges, even if the referendum passes, that start at $5 million in 2025, and it looks like they double every year after. And so there's incremental costs there. And then I noticed that also, and this doesn't have anything to do with the referendum, but there's also a 2026 local sales tax that looks like it's part of the plan as well. So it looks like, in conclusion, if the referendums pass, we want to look at things holistically.
You have about 30 seconds.
Thank you. Residents in Madison are likely looking at a higher cost of living across the board, whether you're a renter or an owner. Some of us that are in the higher income brackets might not be as big of a deal. If you're in the middle or lower income brackets, or if you're house burdened, this could be a little bit harder a pill to swallow. You might have to get an additional income stream or cut costs elsewhere. So I just want to make sure that folks are looking at this.
Thank you. That's your time.
Thank you.
All right, our next registrant is Daniel Rolfs of District 15, representing MIPSI, to be followed by Noah Lieberman, to be followed by Kate Pinkston. Dan?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, council members. My name is Dan Rolfs. Daniel's only when I'm in trouble. I'm the president of MIPSI, and we represent white-collar employees and mid-managers in the city. This is about what kind of community we're going to be. Will we continue to have the same high-quality, high level of services we've all enjoyed for as long as we can remember, or will we start to slide? Reduced library hours, large item pickup, public safety, park maintenance, facility maintenance, and staff layoffs. I represent folks who have already been notified that should this fail, their job will be cut. These are decent family supporting jobs with decent benefits, and they will be cut if this referendum fails. Additionally, layoffs are magnified tenfold when services are cut, and the impact of those service cuts will be felt by those who can least manage it. There are some who said the city is just a big spender. I call bunk. We have grown by leaps and bounds in the last decade, and we continue to do that. And yet, on a per capita basis, our staffing levels are lower than they've been in over a decade. We add 2,500 people every single year and more. This means more trash to pick up, roads to plow, parks to maintain, libraries, fire stations, stormwaters, all of those facilities to maintain. Programs to manage, to administer for things like first-time home buying programs, affordable housing, sustainability, homeless housing services, and on and on. We're in a tough spot. It's the folks who set up this system intended, but a referendum is the way that minimizes the suffering of those with the least. We all know the cuts to positions, staffing, and services will most certainly hit those who can least afford it. The path forward is challenging, I don't doubt that, but we can do it if we work together. As residents of this community and staff that provide the services upon which so many folks rely, we're counting on you to support a referendum to help close the budget gap, protect jobs, and ensure the most vulnerable among us are left out in the cold. One last note I would say is there was a comment made earlier about wage increases to city employees. I would just like to note that those wage increases were to achieve pay parity after years of not being paid the same as public safety employees. Those wage increases were long overdue. Folks who have been around know this, but I want to make sure that the public knows this, that public safety employees bargained their wages collectively and fairly
About
under
30
the laws that
seconds
are
left.
out there. Thank you. General municipal employees were behind in wages for years until this year when we finally caught up. So I would ask you to bear that in mind as well. I don't envy your challenges, but I hope you'll support the referendum moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next registrant is Noah Lieberman of District 14, to be followed by Kate Pinkston, to be followed by Christina Powell. Noah?
Thank you. I have heard a lot in op-ed columns, Nextdoor posts, and here tonight about the cost of passing this referendum, especially for low-income renters. But what I'm afraid these folks and many others in our city fail to see is the cost we are all going to pay if we fail to pass it. Unlike a property tax increase, where those with more wealth would pay their fair share to keep our city running, the cost of failure in passing this referendum is a cruel, regressive tax on the least fortunate among us. It is a price we are unfairly foisting upon those who rely on city services in their day-to-day lives. It is a price paid by everyone who uses a city bus, park, or library, and it's a price paid by the scores of city employees, our friends, family, and neighbors who will have their roles unceremoniously terminated after years of thankless service to Madison. As chair of the Landlord-Tenant Issues Committee, I have seen firsthand the tireless dedication of the city's building inspection staff. The work they do ensures tenants in Madison have access to quality housing, giving renters and their landlords the legal avenues needed to fix problems with their units in a timely, fair, and civil manner. In today's housing market, it is essential that these services be available to renters regardless of their income, and the proposed cuts to this department would rob us of that. Every cut we make comes with a cost, and this one would undoubtedly be borne by the most vulnerable among us. And while I do believe the work of building inspection is incredible, I'm only singling them out because of my personal experience. Every cut that is being proposed if we don't pass this referendum would be devastating to someone. Folks who work outside the typical 9 to 5 in retail, food service, and healthcare, who need our evening and weekend bus service to get to their jobs. Parents doing all they can for their children, who rely on programming at our phenomenal libraries, our gorgeous parks, or the Goodman Pool to help give those kids the joy-filled life they deserve. The CARES team, youth outreach, snowplows, traffic safety, these are not just line items on a budget or dollars on your tax bill. They are lives touched and lives saved by our public servants. I'd like to end my time up here by asking everyone to look at this from a broader angle. No one in this room wanted us to have to go to referendum. We were forced into this difficult decision by years of petty political gamesmanship and withheld funds from the Republican legislature. But failing to authorize this referendum will only give in to everything Robin Vos, Scott
About
Walker,
30 seconds.
and their ilk in the GOP wanted when they put us in this position. They seek a world without empathy, one where we fail to come together to protect the less fortunate, one where we allow fear and self-interest to cloud out the better angels of our nature that push us to extend our hand to those in need and strive together for a better future. Our local government and all the services, employees that comprise it is how we achieve that better future. I beseech you, do not shirk from that responsibility. Do not betray our ideals. Do not endanger the very heart of Madison. Pass this referendum.
That's your
Thank
time.
you.
Our next registrant is Kate Pinkston of District 17, representing the Sandburg Area Neighborhood Association, to be followed by Christina Powell, to be followed by Michael Selesky. Kate?
Thank you, Mayor Rhodes Conway and Common Council. Again, my name is Kate Pinkston. I represent the Sandburg Area Neighborhood Association located in District 17. I am here tonight to advocate that the Imagination Center project sited at Rindall Park, which has been in the works since 2012, move forward, whether or not the November 5th referendum passes. I am asking that the Madison Public Library and the City of Madison collaborate to ensure that an operating budget for the future library is included in the city's budget, even if it has an impact on existing libraries' hours and services. Residents in the Sandburg neighborhood pay property taxes at the same rate as residents in all other Madison neighborhoods. Many of these neighborhoods include libraries, community centers, outdoor gathering spaces, and pools. Our neighborhood lacks all of these amenities. The Sandburg community is located near a declining mall, which once served as a draw for residents and visitors. We are anticipating the construction and operation of a shelter for men experiencing homelessness to replace the current shelter, also located near our community. The Rindall Park encampment brought an explosion of unhoused people to our neighborhood in the summer and fall of 2021. The city neglected to equip the Sandburg neighborhood with resources to deal with the addition of unhoused residents in and near the Sandburg area. The impacts the above realities have had and will continue to have on our community are significant. The city has a responsibility to offset these challenges with services and resources to support, enrich, and empower Sandburg area residents. Madison Public Library's mission is this. Madison Public Library sparks literacy, fosters curiosity, and supports community. We provide equitable access to experiences, ideas, and resources necessary to thrive. Sandburg area residents have not had equitable access to necessary resources and amenities for decades. While the city's financial situation is daunting, it is unacceptable to continue to neglect our residents. We pay taxes too, despite not having gathering spaces to meet outside the school year and no easy access to programming for children or adults, while businesses and residents in our area face economic hardships. The city has failed to equip us with resources to mitigate the challenges posed by concentrating unhoused residents in and near our neighborhood.
About 30 seconds left.
Our neighborhood's hardships greatly outweigh the opportunities and amenities available to us. This is not equity, and the City of Madison has a responsibility to do what it can to remedy this imbalance. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next registrant is Christina Powell of Middleton, representing AFSCME Local 6000, to be followed by Michael Selesky, to be followed by Robert Fettiplace. Christina?
Hello. My name is Christine Powell, and I'm here tonight as an AFSCME 6000 group member and not as an official department speaker. I just need to get that out there. I'm streets operations clerk for the west side of town, but not our public info officer. My opinions are just that, my own. I've been attending Common Council meetings on the 2025 budget as often as I can. I think this is my fourth. I've also attended 3 of the budget education talks hosted at schools. I've been reading, listening, and tonight I'm speaking about the budget. I believe that this proposed referendum is the best way to make sure that the city remains a great place to work as well as live. Madison currently has 2 special charges that help fund the streets division where I work. The Urban Forestry Special Charge, which started as a temporary thing back 10 years ago, and the Resource Recovery Charge, which started in 2022. I'm the person who answers those questions when someone calls and wants to know what that means. They can be tough conversations. The hotline gets calls from confused people wondering why they're paying for extra bits on their water bill. They want to know why they have this forestry charge when they might not have any terrace trees. They want to know why they have a recycling charge suddenly when we always used to take that funding from property tax. They say, can I just not recycle and skip paying? That's not an option. Regressive fees hit elderly adults with tiny bungalows the exact same dollar amount as the $1.3 million homes on Lake Mendota. The difference is how $11.07 hits modest or fixed income budgets. Property tax increases are fixed to the value of the home. Even with cuts in services, there's likely going to be more regressive charges per the mayor's alternative plan. If the Madison does not vote for increasing in funding, we will have to cut services, and services have faces. Job cuts mean more work for existing people, slower response times. It means existing employees are more stressed and turnover will be higher. Training time is the least efficient way to have an employee. They can't give you the answer right away. They need to call you back after checking with people. They make natural mistakes. New snowplow drivers hit a lot more mailboxes. I also take those calls. Madison residents have high expectations. I hear every single week from people who slept in late but want us to come back to their street to get their garbage cart. They want summer yard waste curbside collection. They want extra brush rounds every time there's a storm. They want every single street plowed when we get an inch of snow. Yesterday, the budget numbers for various departments were uploaded, and I haven't had a chance to read through them all yet. The no referendum budget version will have all sorts of service reductions to meet the request of cutting down to existing incomes. I hope that people
About 30
understand
seconds.
when you have a cut of service, it may be attached to dedicated employees. Those who keep their jobs will be stressed, and they will try to cover more work. Response times will be slower, and the grace to do things like getting your forgotten trash will not necessarily be an option. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to take them, but otherwise, I'm just asking people to please vote yes.
Thank you. Our next registrant is Michael Selesky of Fort Atkinson, representing Liuna 236, to be followed by Robert Fettaplace, to be followed by Julia Matthews. Michael?
My name is Michael Selesky. I am the elected Vice President of Liuna 236, representing operators in streets, engineering, fleet services, and library services. I'm here tonight not speaking in an official capacity for any department. My thoughts are my own. Liuna 236 operators are responsible for collecting our solid waste, sweeping our streets, maintaining our roads, collecting the leaves that fall, filling sandbags during flood events, and maintaining almost every vehicle in our city's fleet, including police and fire. This is by no means an exhaustive list. Our dedicated operators are called at all hours of the night on any day of the week to clear the streets during snow and ice emergencies, clearing the paths for fire, police, and ambulances services to save lives, and for the citizens to get around safely. We have done this for almost 100 years, and we stand ready to continue those services and to evolve into many other facets in the years to come. As a department funded primarily through the general fund, cuts would hit us hard. It sends a message to our operators that our labor and our continued sacrifices are not appreciated. The proposed cuts to funding will only serve to increase loads on operators. These operators have been tasked to provide the same high standards of service while populations and mileage demands continue to expand. Our workloads and our responsibilities increase while our remuneration falls further and further behind our peers in the private sector. The consequences of Act 10 continue to have a bitter harvest as our operators have experienced a net negative wage growth against a cost of living increase felt by all of us. As a result, where 10 years ago our operators could afford to live in the city that they serve, many of us today are forced to live further and further away. This puts a strain on our department's ability to respond quickly to storms. This has led to an increase in turnover in our departments, placing us in a constant training footing and depriving our citizens of the institutional memory and experience of those operators who leave our departments. Proposed budget cuts to the streets department may require cuts at our operator level, but that will not stop snow and ice from forcing the remaining operators to cover those cuts with increased shift demands during our busy winter months. Every overtime plow shift takes our operators from their friends and their family and puts them on the front lines, clearing the roads. The increased demand for their time will lead to more staff burnout and, inevitably, will continue the spiral that leads to people choosing to continue their careers in the private sector.
About 30 seconds.
Thank you. I stand in support of the proposed referendum as I stand in solidarity with all of our city departments. As an operator, I can testify that what we do is public service, and it is that sense of public service that helps our operators out of bed every day to do the unsung but necessary work of the City of Madison. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next registrant is Robert Fettaplace of District 3, to be followed by Julia Matthews, to be followed by Justin Hamill. Do we have Robert?
Hello.
My name's Robert. I am an arborist with the City of Madison in the Forestry Department. I'm speaking mostly about the special charge because it relates to me. The Forestry Department is almost entirely funded on the urban forestry special charge. But I am in favor of the referendum. I'm speaking just as a resident of Madison, not as a city employee. I am a member of Local 6000, but yeah, every opinion I'm expressing is just as a private resident. I'm a resident of Madison, also a renter. I like how a lot of the people speaking against the referendum all of a sudden are really concerned about renters. We are very well aware of the cost that the landlords push onto us, you know. Forestry got funded on the special charge about a decade ago with the Emerald Ash Borer crisis. And it's, I mean, as a forestry employee, it's awesome, you know, like we don't have to deal with as much of the headache, budget cuts and stuff, but those flat fees are not great for citizens because they affect the most vulnerable people the most. You know, everyone pays the same no matter whether you have a, $1 million house or if you're a renter or in a small little starter house. So it's an equity issue. You know, if we leave it as these flat fees, the special charges, we use them because they're convenient. You know, it's easier to put those on there than it is to raise taxes. But if we continue to rely on these, it's going to have even more of a negative effect on the most vulnerable people in our population. Yeah, I mean, I know people keep saying how the cost is going to gets passed down to renters, like through property taxes, but like I said, that happens no matter what, like, you know.
You have about 30 seconds.
Our rent's going to go up if the costs go up no matter what, but it's going to be more equitable if we put these costs back on the property taxes where they should have been in the first place. That way people pay, you know, we share the burden more equitably across the city. That's about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next registrant is Julia Matthews, to be followed by Justin Hamill, to be followed by Rick Marks. Julia?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I am calling in tonight to express support for the referendum. There are hours of, I mean, you all know this, but right, there are hours of recorded meetings and presentations that itemize every way the city has worked to stave off this moment for basically the last decade. There's been so much more outreach this year, and the process was started months earlier than usual. All of that with city staff putting in more time while their jobs are at risk if there's no referendum. I want to express appreciation to staff and to all council for taking on this burden. The justification of need for this referendum is clear, and the evidence is available for anyone to see. I was able to look through the proposed cuts yesterday, and they are staggering. I would strongly encourage anyone who is, thinking about looking through the entire budget to see where cuts could be made to look at some of these items. In addition to that, because it really lays out the severity of the situation. I also appreciate that the city has kind of shed some extra light and more details onto the extent to which the state is really putting us in this situation, and they have been for years. And so I would also encourage people to look into ways, if you have influence, to look at how we can get the state to change what they're doing, because that is really the long-term solution to this issue, which I think has also been backed up by the data and the evidence available. So I just want to reiterate, please we need this referendum. I know that the thought of raising property taxes is really scary. I am a brand new home owner, and it's already pretty rough out there, but the amount per household is really low for the amount of services that we'll be able to have. And I also hope that as we get to that point, council looks at making cuts equitably if we need to get to that point, and looking truly at the impact of those cuts on neighborhoods like Sandburg and other neighborhoods that are not close to other services. And with that, I give back my time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next registrant is Justin Hamill of District 18, to be followed by Rick Marks, to be followed by Susan Millar. Justin?
Thank you. My name is Justin Hamill. I'm a City of Madison water utility employee, ASME 6000 member. I'm not a department speaker, and these words are my own. I do not speak for my department. I'm sure as you all are aware, the staff shortage across many areas, but I'm not sure if you're aware of the large quantities of vacancies in the city departments. This includes streets, engineering, water, and more. As a City of Madison employee, I have felt the burden of short staffing, but also seen the mass exodus of employees head into the private sector because of large discrepancies in pay. These are not just new employees. Some of these employees leaving are seasoned, long-term employees who are vital in training and providing guidance to those who are new. What was once a cutthroat, hard to get into department, now is struggling to find anyone to come work. And the people who are hired are looking elsewhere and moving quickly. The turnover is high. Those trained employees are leaving and going elsewhere for better pay, better benefits. We no longer seem to be able to compete with the private industry. A great example is the City of Madison is growing at a very rapid rate. The water utility department has installed over 100 miles of water main since 2014. And with this increase of territory, our staff has not grown to the same capacity. We are shuffling people from positions in operations to another open position in billing and so on, to fix one short-staffed area but making another elsewhere. When in reality, all of these areas should be able to hire fulfill these positions. I am sure those here employed at the streets and engineering department can attest that they feel the same shortage of employees coverage. I'm sure most people in this room remember the polar vortex in 2014. It was bitter cold, and the water department fielded over 300 water main breaks and frozen service lines. It was excessive in extreme circumstances. At that point, the water department was considered fully staffed, and people were still without running water for well over 24 hours. Consider if we had an emergency situation now. The department is covering more territory, has less experienced crews, and we are still looking to fill employees' vacancies. This would mean water would be off for longer, response times would be slower, those working would be in longer shifts, which is a huge risk for exhaustion and more room for error. It's dangerous on all counts. Those that are working will be in overtime, and in that instant, would their salary savings really be worth it?
About 30 seconds.
I hope that you all consider the need for competitive pay in the city to continue to provide this type of service that the City of Madison has grown to expect. With that being said, I hope you vote yes for the referendum. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next registrant is Rick Marks of Oregon, Wisconsin, to be representing the City of Madison Employees Association, to be followed by Susan Millar, to be followed by Michael Odden. Rick?
Hello, everybody. I have met most of you folks already, but for those that you haven't, my name is Rick Marks, and I am a retired city employee who worked here starting in the late 80s, and just a couple of years ago finished my career here with the city as an employee. I now am taking over greater responsibilities for the folks that work for the City of Madison in AFSCME, and Neil Rainford, as most of you may be aware or not, that he is retiring. And Neil's been a permanent fixture and an advocate for labor in this city and the county and in the schools here in Madison and Dane County for all of his career. And I will sorely miss him. Thank you. I just want to say that I was elected the founding president of Local 6000 back when the Wisconsin Uprising was occurring and Act 10 legislation was going on. I and many other people here in this room had to develop an entire new strategy called Meet and Confer and a new handbook based on those contracts that we had in the past. And in the final 5 years, I was elected as vice president of MIPSI and worked underneath Dan Rolfs here tonight. And I'm proud to have helped create a current labor coalition that you see here before you tonight. Going forward, I hope to be here whenever there's something before the council that impacts the employees of your organization, and you can expect a passionate and authentic advocate for these people. I am one of you. This is what I did for my entire life, is work here for the city of Madison. My constant objective will be simple: fairness and parity for the wages, benefits, and working conditions of the city of Madison employees. That's it. To that end, tonight we're talking about supporting that. And Local 6000, of course, is going to support a budget that includes enough revenue to be able to follow through on all those values that we fought for the last decade and a half, to point to the state legislature trying to force us to make changes in our values in this city that we refuse to do. And Local 6000 in favor of any referendum that the alders believe is enough, but no more than necessary, to ensure continued employment of family-sustaining, home-owning, property tax-paying, fair, equal, sustainable wages and benefits. We support the current language that's in the referendum
About 30
that affirms
seconds.
this commitment, and strongly endorse its inclusion in drafting of this document. I want to say, too, that most of the past decade, funding gaps have needed to be filled, and they have been filled in many cases for those people who lost their rights a decade and a half ago. And I appreciate that the Common Council is attempting to do everything they can in collaboration with us to make sure that those people are kept in parity the way we always have expected to be. Thank you.
Thank you, that's your time. Our next registrant is Susan Millar of District 5, to be followed by Michael Otten, to be followed by Emily Putnam-Bueller. Susan?
Thank you. I am currently co-chairing the Sustainable Madison Committee, and I want to say I'm a very proud resident of the city, proud of the city staff's important work implementing cutting-edge sustainability plans. Like me, these members of the city staff, including our mayor, know that when it comes to addressing the climate crisis, we have no time to waste. And for that reason, I ask you to approve the referendum resolution because to balance the upcoming budget without a referendum, as you well know, the city will need to make significant cuts, resulting, as I understand it, in roughly 60 layoffs, plus ongoing serious budget stresses in subsequent years. I'm concerned that with no referendum, many of these layoffs would occur in departments that are key to implementing the city's sustainability work that only recently has ramped up significantly. So by contrast, with a referendum, the city will be able to continue this important work addressing the climate crisis. And this work is extremely important because, and you probably have heard your parents or grandparents say this, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Without a referendum, the city will end up having to cut staff who are working to reduce the threat of climate change. And so their work to prevent increasingly devastating climate change events may very well stop. And the resulting cost of that stopping will be very high for all of our city residents, but especially for low and middle income residents. The cost will be high because the increasingly devastating climate events that are likely to occur will include lack of tree canopy in lower income neighborhoods, which brings on heat islands, more flooding, more heat waves, and so forth. These lower income residents and all other city residents will have to pay for these losses out of their own incomes. So I want to just end my comments here by saying that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And when it comes to the climate crisis and all the excellent work the city is doing to help address the climate crisis, we have no time to waste. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next registrant is Michael Otten of District 3, to be followed by Emily Putnam-Bueller, to be followed by Lisa Veldran. Michael? Here we go.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. A little nervous, first time doing this. I was born in Madison at St. Mary's, so I'm a lifelong Madison-Dane County resident. We're talking about a vote on whether to proceed on a referendum. Since you're asking for our input, I would suggest that you listen and really listen to your constituents. I'm opposed to the referendum. I'll say that up front. Taxing and spending is out of control, and the increased property taxes caused by the possibility of a successful referendum will result in a financial burden for generations to come. Continual abuse of the capital budget will also result in a significant increase in debt service, which lands on the operating budget. Mayor and council members, thank you for poking the bear. A lot of us have stood by in the background and watched what's been going on and really haven't participated. We've been awakened, and I think we're just surprised by the level of financial mismanagement in the years that it's been going on. Rather than adjusting your spending to align with regularly available revenue sources, you appear ready to open the genie's bottle and rush to a referendum. If you succeed on the referendum push, we will never get the genie back in the bottle. We will be doomed to continual and unnecessary increases in our property tax bills to enable further mismanagement and overspending. Like all individuals and families, the city of Madison, we must learn to live within our means. I want to know what's going on. I went to the very first budget meeting in our district, and that was on May 1st, I believe. You were asking at that point for, I believe, 28 million. Maybe the financial director could confirm that. A week later, we get the article in the paper that says you had a $31 million surplus last year for 2023. Why were the results delayed that long? Why does it take until May for us to get that information out to our taxpayers? Were they intentionally delayed? Was it delayed in order to get a trial balloon out there for the referendum? Begs the question, I guess. No business could operate by delaying their financial results that long. The next week after that, it was reported that the city was 12 million behind, I believe.
You have about 30 seconds left.
In collecting fines and fees. What was that, 30 seconds?
30 seconds.
I'll rush through this. You want to rush to this referendum, you don't have a good grasp on our year-to-date performance. Do we have good numbers for the first half of the year? I don't think we do. BRT, your ridership is less than pre-pandemic. It will cost more, revenue will be lower. What is the real cost to operate it? How are you going to fund that? You continually rally, I've just one more point.
That's your time.
Against the
Thank you, sir.
state legislature.
Sir, that's
and
your
revenue sharing
time.
formula. 30
Sir, that is your
seconds.
time.
You should spend your time with the state legislature.
Our next registrant is Emily. Sir, that is your time. Thank you. Everybody else fell into 3 minutes. Our next registrant is Emily Putnam Bueller, to be of District 11, to be followed by Lisa Veldran, to be followed by Kate Mallory. Do we have Emily? Doesn't look like we have Emily in the room.
Mayor, I don't see Emily listed in attendance.
Right, then we have Lisa Veldran of District 10, to be followed by Kate Mallory, to be followed by Mary Batari. Do we have Lisa?
Yep, I'm here. Good evening. My name is Lisa Veldran, and I live on the southwest side of Madison. I expect fundamental city services in return for my annual property taxes. Reliable garbage collection, clean drinking water, safe roads, accessible libraries, dependable police, fire, and ambulance response, and essential public health programs. These services are foundational to a high quality of life for all residents. I expect that any surplus funds are carefully reviewed and allocated by our elected officials, who are entrusted with managing our property tax dollars. This includes taxes paid by landlords, which are often passed on to tenants as increased rent. Since 2011, our city's mayors and councils have had ample opportunities to address the challenges posed by Act 10 and the pandemic. Confronting the structural budget deficit and adapting to our new reality were options available in each budget cycle. Instead, they and you have opted to expand a growing list of unsustainable projects that were financially untenable. As property owners, we currently pay Madison property taxes, Dane County property taxes, Madison Metropolitan School District taxes, MATC taxes, an additional vehicle registration fee for both the city and the county, and additional fees added on to our municipal bill for urban forestry and resource recovery. And now you say this referendum is the only way out, further putting the burden on the taxpayers in this city. I say shame on you and every elected official since 2011 for continually voting for a budget with a structural deficit without confronting the realities of this future we are now facing. You have put us here, not the property taxpayer. If this referendum is placed on the November ballot, I will be voting no. And to all the public listening this evening, there is a city council race in 2025. I highly encourage individuals who are not afraid to educate themselves about city government and are willing to question how budget decisions will affect the property owners down the road. Mark your calendars for December 1st, 2024, and you can start circulating your nomination papers. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next registrant is Kate Mallory of District 5, to be followed by Mary Batari, to be followed by Harry Richardson. Kate?
Hello. Good evening. My name is Kate Mallory. I'm a resident of Madison from District 5, and I'm here to urge you to vote in favor of this referendum. I'm also a renter and someone living paycheck to paycheck, which I mention in relation to the concern, if we want to call it that, mentioned by some previous speakers about this referendum impacting renters. As someone who has absolutely struggled to pay my own rent from time to time, I support this measure regardless of any risk of this measure increasing my own costs, because I don't want to live in a city that chooses to cut essential services and abandon marginalized community members when there are any other avenues available. I want to highlight just a few of the items put forth as proposed budget cuts as released yesterday. These budget cuts would disproportionately impact already marginalized community members and include things like cutting city funding to Vivant Health, a local HIV/AIDS clinic, decreasing library hours and staffing, a move which would particularly impact unhoused and low-income community members just looking for a safe place to access resources, and cutting down the number of poll workers to the minimum required levels, which would again disproportionately impact communities already facing heightened levels of voter suppression. The discontinuation of the arts grants program, ending the city's financial contribution to agencies providing youth restorative justice services are additionally alarming, as well as reducing night and weekend services for Metro Transit, and there is so much more on this list. Since I have a little bit of time left, and I know the mayor can speak to these points with more clarity than I, but I'm guessing it may come up again, I did just want to rebut a point a previous speaker made, that of the cost of the rapid transit system. As cited in the frequently asked questions put out by the city, the bus rapid transit project does not come out of the city's operating budget that pays for city services, and the vast majority of the bus rapid transit project is funded by federal infrastructure spending and not via local taxes, so just isn't relevant in this situation. This referendum is being put forth to fund libraries and health centers, not caviar and champagne. I urge you to vote in favor of putting this referendum on the ballot and to continue looking for ways to mitigate this budget crisis without throwing the most marginalized and under-resourced members of Madison's community under the bus or defunding the bus itself. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next registrant is Mary Batari of District 6, to be followed by Harry Richardson, to be followed by Alexis London. Mary?
Hi, thank you, Mayor. The city's structural deficit has been around since 2012, long before most of you walked in the door. Maybe Mike Revere is an exception. And it's due basically to two dynamics: a rapidly growing city and harsh restrictions on revenue imposed by the legislature. Madison gets the lowest amount of shared revenue per resident in the state, and this is not an accident. The Republican legislature has chosen to punish Madison for its success, just as it's chosen to bully and dismantle the UW system piece by piece, just as it's chosen to bully our school teachers and dismantle and starve our public schools. If Madison received the per resident average in shared revenue, we'd be getting $54 million. It would erase this deficit by 2 times. Our city is the fastest growing one in the state, yet every year we're cutting from our budget rather than adding to it. Even though the rough years of the pandemic Even during the entire rough years of the pandemic, this Common Council has sort of wisely chosen to cut $6 million in 2021, to cut $1 million in 2022, to cut another $1 million in 2023. In 2024, you implemented a very costly 1% budget cuts across the board. That's a $3 million reduction, and we continue to keep jobs open, which is another $2.4 million in savings. But the result of all this is that we have 10% fewer city employees per 1,000 than we did 10 years ago. The mayor has asked agencies to prepare 5% across the board cuts. This would eliminate 147 more positions. This is on top of 144 positions that are being kept open. The city just can't keep doing this. It can't keep making these kinds of cuts. City services need to grow as the population grows, period. Now, later on, you might hear a little bit of magical thinking. You might hear that the state legislature will all of a sudden leap to our rescue and rush through a sales tax. The governor already proposed a sales tax for cities in his last budget and tried to get that implemented. And the future of the legislature is uncertain. You might hear that we should just dump the whole rainy day fund, use all of it to save ourselves today. Well, the rainy day fund helps us keep a AAA rating, which saves us huge amounts in borrowing costs and has other benefits. And I don't know if you noticed, but the stock market took a wild ride this week.
About 30
We don't know
seconds
what hazards might be ahead. You all know how hard our city employees work. They need you now more than ever before, because this city, its families, its children, and its schools all rise and fall together. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next registrant is Harry Richardson of District 6, to be followed by Alexis London, to be followed by Mark Clear. Harry? Do we have Harry online?
Mayor, I do not see Harry in attendance.
All right, then Alexis London of District 12, to be followed by Mark Clear, to be followed by Chai Mua. Alexis? Do we have Alexis?
Yes. Hi. Good evening. Thanks. My name's Alexis London. I live in District 12. I've been living in this area for about 18 years. I'm also the executive director of Bayview Foundation, which is an affordable housing development near downtown Madison. I'm speaking tonight in support of the proposed referendum. Without the additional revenue gained via the referendum, essential services will be cut and thousands of Madison citizens will be without key supports that are needed to create a safer and stronger and more equitable Madison. The consideration of cuts, even what may appear to be a modest cut of 5%, is impossible for me to imagine, especially at a time when the population is growing and I see every day the need for more and more supports and services in the city, especially for those who are most marginalized and seeking of services. Without the referendum, services such as outreach and case management programming for people experiencing homelessness, restorative justice initiatives for teens and young adults, community outreach that's part of the Madison Police Department, health services that are part of Access Community Health Center, and really critical arts and cultural programming will be dramatically reduced and in many cases completely eliminated. As the director of Bayview, I see the value of many of these services every single day. We work with families coming out of homelessness. We engage youth in restorative justice programming. We secure arts grants to create public art to beautify the city. We refer people without health insurance to Access, and we know exactly what will happen if this referendum doesn't pass. So we'll be doing everything we can to support this work, to work with the city council and the mayor to ensure the passage of this referendum. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. I'm going to try and see if Harry Richardson is in the queue online as Barbara Smith.
Yeah, probably. That's his wife.
Harry, is that you?
Hello, can
Yes,
you hear me?
we can. Go ahead.
Okay. Sorry, I had a problem here on the machine. Yes, I appreciate the city council taking the time to hear from the regular citizens tonight. Mary Batari said much of what I was thinking about saying better than I could have said it, and is also a neighbor along with her spouse. I'm a longtime Madison resident since 1977. I'm a AFSCME retiree, and I would speak in behalf of my AFSCME siblings that they, should be able to maintain their jobs. Then they're doing a good job, as many people have already spoken. They're doing important work. The city works because AFSCME workers are working out there, and so I would urge the city to support this referendum, the city council to support this referendum. I'll certainly do all I can for my part to talk to my neighbors and friends and the political groups that I'm involved in that make sure that this referendum gets all the support that I can muster. And I would urge the city council members to support this resolution and this referendum, and that they need to do a really good job of educating their constituencies. They need to publicize the reasons for the referendum and make it real clear to the average citizen that there's really no way to avoid this referendum. As many speakers have already noted, it's largely the fault of the state for not adequately funding the city. They plainly just don't like the city of Madison or Milwaukee. Anyway, this is a real important issue. I hope that you'll consider supporting the referendum. Thank you very much for your time. I think that the city is coming into some really tough times with climate change, with need for the city for more housing, and we need more city services, more city support, and not less. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next tradition is Mark Clear of District 19, to be followed by Chai Mua, to be followed by Jacob Auka.
Good evening, everyone. Mark Clear served on this council from 2007 to 2018, so you can blame me a little bit for the predicament that the city now faces. The councils on which I served and the mayors I served with and struggled mightily to maintain a level of city services that the people of Madison expect and deserve within the artificial and arbitrary constraints imposed by state government. We did not always succeed, but you can also give me a bit of credit for the fact that the situation is not more dire than it is, because we implemented techniques, some would call them gimmicks, such as the urban forestry special charge, which has been mentioned many times tonight, to try to diversify the city's revenue sources while also distributing the pain as equitably as we could. We didn't do those things to be clever. We did them because our options were few. Subsequent councils, including this one, have expanded those techniques and added others like the local vehicle registration fee. The reason we're at this point is wholly because of those artificial and arbitrary constraints imposed by state government. Now, I need to tell you a quick story. When he joined the city as finance director, I asked Dave Schmedeke, who had previously been the state budget director, an unfair question, which is I asked him if the city's tax system was fair. What he told me was eye-opening. He said that the three primary types of taxes, property, sales, and income, each have their inherent disparities, and that a fair system balances each of those three legs so that no one group is carrying an outsized burden. Historically, he said, Wisconsin had such a balanced system, and the state collects income and sales taxes, municipalities collect property taxes, the state uses shared revenue essentially as a proxy so that cities can share in the income and sales tax. But in the early 2000s, that balance started to shift, shared revenue didn't keep pace, and the growth of needs for services increased. Got a lot worse in the 2010s, but it hadn't started then. As cities' needs increased, the state's share of providing city services decreased, putting more and more burden on property taxes. When people across the state felt that burden, the legislature responded in 2011, not by increasing shared revenue, but instead by artificially and arbitrarily constraining cities' ability to raise property taxes while giving cities no other options to make up that revenue. Over the years since, the result has been steady and predictable. Anyone in Madison can see the symptoms of this process by looking at their municipal services bill or their vehicle registration. Meanwhile, a
About 30
balloon has
seconds.
been building that is ready to burst, and that's why we're here today. Dave Schmedeke described to me that fair system that we don't have anymore, and the only option is to go to referendum. There's a message out there that we've heard that the city must live within its means, but the fallacy of that narrative is that the means have artificially and arbitrarily been constrained for years. Madison's tremendous growth is, and I'm
That's your
out
time.
of time. Okay, thank you all.
Thank you. Our next registrant is Chai Mua of District 14, to be followed by Jacob Auka, to be followed by Kayla Every. Chai?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. You know, it was really hard for me to think of how I was sitting with this issue around the referendum. You know, I'm saying as much as I want this referendum to be on the ballot, and because I know that so much of the essential services that folks have talked about earlier are essential to continuing, are essential to make sure that we keep continuing. I really can't support this referendum. As a service provider who's seen a 300% increase in requests for housing, but yet don't see the right proportion of investment from the city into affordable housing or into life, basic needs for most vulnerable citizens in the city of Madison. I have a hard time supporting this referendum without seeing where all of this is truly going to be invested. As I'm looking at the potential, as I'm looking at the cuts that are being proposed, but also looking at the current budget and seeing where investments are made, the investments that are made into areas like community development and public health is still only like 25% of the police budget. So I think we have to come back to really look at where investments are being put into, where the budget is being put into, and where else we can pull from if we're really talking about protecting those most vulnerable in this community. So again, I'm against this referendum. I don't think it should go to the ballot. I think as a city, you all need to come back, relook at where funding is being invested, and then come back with a solid plan if you want a referendum of exactly where that money is going to be invested. And as a homeowner in the city, as someone who works with folks, I can just see the impact that increased taxes are going to continue to have on the housing market in Madison. And for those who those who rent can continue to say yes, you don't mind, but many folks can't even get into housing. And we haven't even looked at the issue and some of the services that are needed for that. And so increased taxes are going to continue to drive housing costs up, and folks
about 30 seconds
not to be able to get the life-saving and the basic needs that they actually need. So until the city of Madison invests in basic needs of those most vulnerable, I cannot support a referendum like this.
Thank you. Our next registrant is Jacob Auka of District 12, to be followed by Kayla Every, to be followed by Kara McNeil. Jacob?
Hey, am I audible?
You are.
Thank you, Ms. Mayor, and thanks to the Common Council. So I learned about this referendum when one of my friends who works for the police department reached out to me and said, will you please vote yes on this so that I don't lose my job? And she was the first of several. Tons of people who are friends of mine who work for the city in one capacity or another said, please vote yes on this so I don't lose my job. So I'll tell you something, if we don't pass this referendum, we will lose a lot of funding for things like the police department, the fire department, garbage collection. And I think this is really simple. I like that when my trash is full, somebody takes it. I like that if there's a fire, someone puts it out. And I like that if there's an emergency, there are cops to call. And I want all of those utilities to have appropriate funding. I hear a lot of people who are concerned about property taxes, so let's talk about those. I have a friend who just bought a house that is $300,000. he will pay $15 a month in property taxes per this referendum if it passes. I know that he spent more on dinner the other day, and I know that he would way rather forfeit his spinach tortellini than he would lack funding for city utilities. If you are a business and you have $50 million worth of property, you pay $2,500 worth of property tax because of this referendum. And that is a pinprick on a financial report for a business. It's less than the amount that they're probably paying for their insurance policy. So the way that I see it, if you have somebody that you want to be upset with, then you can be upset with the Wisconsin State Legislature. Look at that bar chart of the shared revenue per resident, and look at how tiny the enormous city of Madison is. So that's all I got. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next registrant is Kayla Every of Vernon Ave, to be followed by Kara McNeil, to be followed by Robbie Weber. We have Kayla.
Hi, yes. First of all, thank you all. I appreciate you being here to hear comments tonight. And I just want to share, I guess, about neither like in support or in opposition of a referendum, but rather add some context that I have concerning some of the work that I do in this community. And so for reference, I'm a person who works in our community in a partnership of organizations. I don't want to speak out. There'll be more comments from my organization, but this is my personal comment, working as somebody who has experienced homelessness myself and currently works in partnership with the city of Madison and many other organizations across our community, Dane County, in collaborative community plans that have over the past year and a half released plans that I feel are very related to this. So the first plan, Dane Forward, which is a 5-year plan to prevent and end homelessness. There's also a similar plan that focuses specifically on youth. And then the third that comes to mind for me is the Regional Housing Strategies Roadmap for Solving Dane County's housing crisis. And so, unfortunately, there's a lot of things that come to mind for me that I will not be able to share or speak about throughout this, but I think it is really important there was a lot of work, and honestly, these were plans funded by the city of Madison, Dane County, and other groups that focused on what kind of impact or where our community was at as far as housing, the housing crisis as it currently stands, and kind of the plan that we need to move forward. And so what I'm concerned about is that I am worried that this referendum, I don't feel as though I have enough information about it and how it plays into this. And I think that it's really important that everyone get a chance to look at these plans.
You have about 30 seconds left.
And just look at there's a lot of different options and thoughts and kind of commitments that have went into this and how we can fund the most vital services in our community. Housing first is a huge one. I know that, there is a lot of information that is accessible to people about how Housing First programs work. Please look into it because it can actually decrease the cost of emergency services and other services across our community.
Thank you. That's your time.
Thank you so much.
Our next registrant is Kara McNeil of District 17, to be followed by Robbie Weber, to be followed by Nino Amato. Kara?
Hi, I'm Kara. I live in the Sandburg school area. I also work at the school. I am not here on behalf of Madison School District. I'm here as a resident. My main reason for being here today is because I know that if the referendum doesn't pass, that our library district is going to see a lot of cuts. And they are working to build an Imagination Center, which would give our community finally access to a library, to a resource center, We're one of the only schools that don't have access to a before-school program that has transportation provided to our school. We have a big hotel population over there where a lot of our residents are there seeking temporary housing, and there is no transportation that they have that is reliable to any sort of resources in our area. Our children in our school don't have resources like a lot of our schools do on the west side to get transportation or access to after-school programming. There's just not a lot of safe options for them out there. So I'm here advocating for all the kids in my neighborhood, for my own kids who live there, that this resource center, this referendum passing can allow this to be built, which will provide so many resources to our area that currently really is without a lot. I also know that being a part of attending the city planning meetings, working on like the Northeast area plan, seeing the trajectory of our population increase over the next few years is huge. So to cut resources for city positions like trash collection and our water and our police and fire, it just seems like it's going to put us in a really horrible spot to cut these positions when we're seeing a huge increase in our resident growth. So I'm here to advocate that, please, we need this referendum to pass. Our East Siders are drowning and we need a lot more support from our city, and this referendum is our stepping stone to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next registrant is Robbie Weber of District 5, to be followed by Nino Amato, to be followed by Paul Soglin. Robbie?
Hi. I'm going to start with a quote that is actually on the side of the IRS building in Washington, D.C. And it's from Oliver Wendell Holmes. He said, "Taxes are the price we pay for a civilized society." And what that means is we are all in this together, and there is no way to have a society without all putting in something. There's a lot of different types of taxes: income taxes, sales taxes, import taxes, property taxes, business taxes, personal taxes. There is no perfect system, but in Wisconsin, we rely for municipalities on property taxes and whatever the state legislature decides to give back to us in shared revenue. That's our choice. We get a lot for our taxes in Madison. We have an excellent quality of life. We have excellent services. We have great parks. We have great programs. We have libraries. We have all kinds of, we have trash pickup. I mean, sometimes people have to pay to have their trash picked up in other places. So we get a lot. But it looks like we're going to have to put a question on the ballot in the fall, how much we value the services and quality of life that we have here in Madison. The state is clearly shortchanging Madison in shared revenue. We send off money to the state in in sales taxes and income taxes, and we get back $29 per person, whereas the average municipality gets $142 per person. We know that they're doing this because they don't like Madison. They don't like how successful we are. They don't like our politics. But that's what we have to deal with. So we are either going to have to pay more in taxes, or we are going to have to make some severe cuts. And nobody really wants either of those choices. Being an alder is tough. I did it for 6 years. That's about my limit. And yes, just like Mark Clear, I went through a lot of tough budgets as well.
You have about 30 seconds.
You're going to have to muster all of your strength, your knowledge, your courage, and do the right thing. Put the referendum on the ballot, and then explain the facts to your constituents. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next registrant is Nino Amato of District 9, to be followed by Paul Soglin, to be followed by Tamaya Travis. Nino?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Good. As a lifelong resident of Madison and grandson of Italian immigrants who fled the rising fascism and communism in Europe, Madison has been our home for 4 generations. And as good people who have consistently supported increases in Madison City's budgets and the Madison Metropolitan School budgets, Madison taxpayers and renters are finally at a threshold. And they're feeling our elected officials and some of our city agencies are taking city taxpayers' generosity for granted. That's why Madison renters and residential property taxpayers have hit their threshold. And because of that, they're now facing 3 referendums, one for $604 million put forth by the school district, and now we're coming up with ours. There couldn't be a worse time to put a referendum on a ballot. I propose you put it off until April. Why? Because what we can do in the interim is create a crisis management emergency task force consisting of former city alders, county and city department heads, business and labor leaders to come up with a strategic financial strategy to address the legislative fiscal constraints and also come up with measurable and budgetary services that we can show have results. The task force would then report back to the city council on or before November 1st. They would then put this before the voters and then put whatever increases may need to be done on the April ballot. I have never seen such resistance and such backlash in all my years in city politics. I believe you will lose that vote, and I also believe the school district will at least lose one of the 2. This is not the time to put the referendum on the fall ballot. And I'll be available later to respond to any questions.
Thank you. Our next registrant is Paul Soglin of District 12, to be followed by Tamaya Travis, to be followed by Alexis Turner.
Thank you. I think we're all in agreement that we believe in economic justice. And I think we're all rather horrified at the 2 alternatives that have been presented for this financial crisis, the referendum and the opportunity for these drastic cuts. That is not the only choice the city has. In fact, there's a far superior choice that brings economic justice and an opportunity for the city to right some of the wrongs we've heard discussed regarding the state legislature. There are many reasons for the city's fiscal crisis. Shared revenue is only one of them. It's only one part of the problem. And it is a sad mistake to say that shared revenue is the only revenue that we get from the state of Wisconsin. I'd ask right now, is there anybody in the room besides Dave Schmidtke who can describe the expenditure restraint program and how much money Madison gets from it? What about the municipal services program? The point is this: there are a multitude of opportunities to work with the state, but before we do that, we have to be honest about our challenges here. I want to also make it clear that there is structural deficits and structural deficits. Structural deficits of $2 to $3 million occurred in most of the years that I was mayor. They were a result of external factors: rising fuel costs, rising insurance costs. They were not the kind of structural deficits you've seen the last 5 years, which have ranged from $10 to $20 million, which are the result in part of decisions inappropriately made in past city budgets starting with 2020, relying on a number of factors such as the use of premium and the excessive use of the rainy day fund. There is an alternative, but you're going to have to look to Milwaukee for the solution, because they really outdid you in 2023. Open records requests reveal, tragically, that Madison and Dane County legislators had far more contact in 2023's budget discussions with the state than they had from contacts from Madison. We're not just talking about city government, we're talking about county government, we're talking about labor unions, we're talking about the business community. They knew how to do it. Not bad for a city that's detested just as much as this one. Nothing's going to happen unless you show up. I think Woody Allen made the point. I don't remember if it's 80% or 90% of life is showing up. Now's the opportunity. And there are at least 4 possibilities that you can explore with the state government.
You have 30
And
seconds
remember
left.
this, you're not dealing with Scott Walker. You're not dealing with a legislature coming out of Act 10. You are going to be dealing with Governor Evers, and you're going to be dealing with a very differently constituted state government. You can be looking at increases in terms of the city of Madison for a sales tax, for a regional transit authority.
Thank you. That's your time.
And additional services. Thank you.
Our next registrant is Tamaya Travis of Anson Drive, representing HSC Education and Advocacy, to be followed by Alexis Turner. Tamaya?
Hi, my name is Tamaya Travis. I am the HSC Education and Advocacy Committee Chair, and I am coming to speak neither in support nor opposition of the referendum, just coming to give a few thoughts. As a group made up over 100 diverse organizations, the Homeless Services Consortium at this time is not in direct support or opposition of the item, but instead the Dane County Education and Advocacy Committee would like to share the relevant information concerning the city's proposed referendum, as it poses a significant risk to sustainability of the progress made during the COVID-19 pandemic. Should an addendum go to vote and fail, the consortium has responded that the pandemic, alongside our collaborative applicant, the City of Madison, to implement substantial improvements to ensure basic safety of our unsheltered and housing insecure and our health sensitive community members in various areas, including the centralization and enhancement of sheltering conditions. The successful transition of individuals from hotels to permanent housing and the robust eviction prevention measures. These advancements have been pivotal in addressing the local homelessness and housing insecurity during an unprecedented national housing crisis. But let us be clear, this is not enough. Despite these many achievements, we have also experienced setbacks such as the loss of housing units due to unexpected sale of Madison's Rethink and Tree Lane properties, the conversion of hotels to housing and other vital programs, which leave us facing the projected deficit of 1,683 housing units needed to meet local service needs entering 2025. Additionally, numerous unmet needs persist within our community, such as the lack of affordable housing, where the average studio apartment in Dane County, inadequate shelter conditions, the need for supportive services, and organized resources. The proposed referendum may maintain crucial funding for these services and sustain significant progress we have worked tirelessly to achieve.
But 30 seconds left.
But increasing property taxes could propose additional risk, pushing our community further away from a solution where rent costs will continue to rise, creating even more difficult cost of living for the entire community. Thank you.
Thank you. And our next and I think last registrant wishing to speak is Alexis Turner of Fitchburg.
Hi, everyone. My name's Alexis Turner. I've worked for the City of Madison for 40 plus years. And my first job, I made about $30 a day. Well, I make close to that. I do better now, I will say that. Each cubic foot of new road increases the long-term cost to residents to maintain, to clear, to collect trash, to provide clean water, to provide efficient and effective stormwater, to enforce, to respond to emergencies, to mental health, to minimize heat islands. So for those of us who are addicted to our personal vehicles, we are part of the issue, because the more roads you build, the more infrastructure you have to support. especially wider roads. One of the things I'm in favor of is the bus rapid transit system because our roads are at capacity and we cannot really afford to continue this way. So I am in support of the referendum. I would like to see more effective use, as it were, so that we aren't subsidizing personal vehicles. And I would also heard it described that we tend to approach things from a boutique perspective when it comes to city services. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are all the registrants wishing to speak on item 68. Alder Madison?
Yep, I just wanted to ask whether or not Mark Clear had more to share.
All right, so before we jump into questions, that is next. Just one note that if you, I would very much appreciate if you could ask a specific question. If you are asking to just give people additional time, it's been requested that we vote on an additional minute for folks. So I'd give the alder an opportunity to ask a specific question.
Yep. Well, nope, I'm just asking for more time.
All right, is there objection to giving Mark Clear an additional minute? Seeing no objection, Alder Clear.
Thank you, I appreciate that, and I won't take the entire minute. The only point I was going to make that I didn't have time to say was that I believe that the folks of the city of Madison understand the stakes that are in front of us and that they will support a referendum. So thank you. Thank you, Alder Madison.
Thank you. Alder Miadze.
Yes, just asking if Mayor Paul Soglin can finish his statement.
Is there objection to having Paul Soglin get an extra minute? Not seeing any objection? Paul?
I'll pass. I'll answer specific questions.
All right, thank you. Alder Wahili was next.
The last caller to finish our thoughts also. Don't remember her name.
Alexis, did you want to finish anything? Nope, she's good. Alder Govindarajan.
Thank you. If Adam Nelson is here, I just have a clarifying question.
Let's see. I don't think we have Adam anymore.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Bennett.
I have a question for Mark.
Mark?
I'm sure Robbie could answer too as a former alder. But you were speaking about how back in 2019 or in former budgets you had made numerous mitigating measures, and like myself and some of our colleagues weren't around at that time, so it would be really helpful to just kind of gain a contextually kind of what was the conversations happening then, and like, you know, that led us up to this point. I'm sure you were thinking, or maybe you weren't, like 5 years out about what we would be talking about now in 2024. So if you just place us there and like what was the conversations?
Sure. Well, as you know, it's really hard to think that far out ahead.
Yeah.
But as you also know, every budget cycle is the worst budget cycle ever. And that becomes kind of a trite saying, but it's also true. That every budget cycle, this problem that we've been describing gets a little bit worse, where the city's needs and requirements, because of all the things that we've talked about, get larger and the constraints get a little tighter. And so over the years, there have been many efforts, and actually Mayor Rhodes Conway, when she was on the council, initiated one of those processes which resulted in the urban forestry special charge, which was really a way to try to get around the constraints and find a different way to increase revenue to the city in a way that could be done that would support a specific service. And, you know, subsequent councils, I can't remember if it was this one or the previous one, did the resource recovery fee that is essentially the same idea.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Alder Knox.
Yes, thank you. Madam Mayor, I'd like Mr. Nino Amato to finish his statements. I'm sorry I didn't ask at the time that he completed.
That's okay. Is there objection to granting another minute to Nino Amato? Not seeing an objection. So.
Thank you.
One more minute, Nino? You should be able to unmute, Nino. You should have a prompt to unmute. There you go.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. In summary, we can't solve our fiscal crisis with the same policy thinking we used when we created them. And as David just pointed out, every future budget cycle will even be more challenging. And the only way we can address this is look at restructuring the way we deliver cost-effective city services and programs, which means we got to look at the county, got to look at the city, what services we provide. We look at backroom services. When I was president of the technical college system, we were up against Republicans, and they were going to do all sorts of restructuring that would have harmed us.
About 20 seconds.
We welcomed the audit. We came up with a more restructuring program to make the dollars go a longer way, and it was successful. Give the voters a chance to hear something substantive and put the referendum then in the spring ballot. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Harrington McKinney.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Robbie, I don't know if you're still on. Robbie, are you still there? Robbie Weber?
She is, she's left the room, Alder, but she is just outside it. So we'll see if we can get her back.
Okay, thank you. If not, we can go on, Madam Mayor.
We've got her back. Robbie, I'm sorry, Alder Harrington McKinney has a question for you.
Okay.
Go ahead, Alder.
Thank you. Robbie, you know, I'm always so impressed with you. And so one of the things that you put out in the space is that we all have to put in something. And would you take a minute to just kind of caveat and complete that statement? You only have a minute, but I know you can do it.
Okay. Well, I'm actually going to tee off on something that somebody asked Mark Clear, and someone just asked me in the hallway, and that is, what would we have done, what we did when we were on the council? And I tried to say that building out is much more expensive than building up, because trying to service dispersed, low-density areas of the city is much more expensive than compressed areas. And for those who think that BRT is expensive, I've got news for you about how much roads cost. And I tried to get the city to not build so many roads when I was on the council and expand roads, because I knew it was going to be expensive. But now we're stuck with them, and I think that we need to change our transportation policy so that we don't have to service expanded roads, because they are really, really expensive. And the decisions we're making now are going to be much cheaper in the long run.
Alder Harrington McKinney, anything additional?
Sorry, I don't think that answered your question, but.
No, but are you complete? Are you complete? That's my question.
Anything additional?
No, that actually what I just said was everything else that was in my notes.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Robbie.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Field.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to see if Michael Odden wanted to take a minute and conclude his comments.
Is there any objection to an additional minute? Seeing no objection, Michael?
Yes, thank you, Derek. I just want to apologize. First time going through this, and I went a little long, so I won't go long this time, I guarantee it. I just think that this path we're going down is not the necessary one. And listening to all of the speakers, there is vital services we need, and we have revenue that we have to figure out how we're going to use it to our best advantage. Going to referendum, I think, again, is the genie out of the bottle. Once you get that, you'll want it all the time. So I think we have to stop and reassess and go from there, but thank you for the time.
Thank you. Alder Rummel.
Thank you, Mayor.
I'm kind of honored to have so many former alders with us tonight, and I would ask a question of Nino Amato.
Okay.
Here.
Yep, go ahead, Alder.
Thank you for raising a question that rarely we have heard, or an idea, and that is to wait until April. The common sense logic is a big turnout in November, it's the best time. How do you, other than the points you've already made, how do you counter like timing questions?
Well, as we all know, in politics, timing is everything. If you look at the issues that are being raised by Republicans on the one side, which obviously many of us do not agree with, and what's being advanced with the future on the other side, is that we are in a middle class crisis. People are living paycheck to paycheck. There are people who now have graduated and can't even make their payments on their cars or their home. And if there was ever a time, even though it's a big turnout, there are people who are going to say, I cannot afford to live in the city. They are retired people, they're new home buyer people, they're renters who are saying, if you pass more taxes, my rent's going to go up. There's an undercurrent I have not seen in this city in all my years in politics. And I truly believe that when people come out and there's going to be a group that's going to say, vote no, it's going to go down the column, no on one or both of the school district referendums. And what will happen is that'll trail all the way down and it'll hurt the city of Madison. And the reason for that is we haven't come up with a real in-depth plan. And that's why I proposed a task force. By putting this off until April, we can go through this in a more pragmatic way, bring the necessary players, show the taxpayers what we've done to address the issues, and then I think it would pass. But without that, I think it's doomed to fail.
Thank you. That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you, Alder. I have no other alders in the queue for questions. Alder Miadze?
Yeah, just a question for Paul and C. Just the last question, were the budget basically the same through the years that you were mayor?
Are you asking, was the budget crisis different each year?
Yeah.
The short answer is yes. There were not major crises every year. And, well, for example, in the 1970s, we had the oil embargo and fuel and energy costs shot through the roof, which was unanticipated. And that was a major crisis that affected a 2-year cycle, but we in effect got over it. And long term, the city has solved that. I assume this practice is still going on of the city buying fuel futures, gasoline futures, to keep costs down and to steady them out. The first year I came back, well, in the 90s, let me correct something. Mark Clear is just totally wrong about what he said about the history of shared revenue. I don't know what Dave Schminicki said in that conversation. I don't recall it, but I do recall the history of shared revenue. And shared revenue did not have an adverse effect on the city of Madison from the time it was readopted in the Lucy years, the 1970s, until we get into the mid-1980s. And the reason is that the national economy was stagnant. What happens is in the mid-80s to the late 80s, the city of Madison starts taking off compared to the rest of the state. And as a result of that, when you look at the three elements that are part of the formula for shared revenue, population, poverty, and tax base, the size of the levy, our levy base increases, which hurts us immensely in the shared revenue formula. And so consequently, something that nobody conceived of was happening. A city was having massive growth in the levy, its tax base, and in poverty. And that was measured several ways, because back in the 70s, 7% of Madison school children were eligible for free and reduced lunch, and that was the number of AFDC households that we had in the city at the time. By the time we get to the 1990s, there's 22% of the kids in the Madison schools are eligible, and that was pretty verifiable as an accurate measure of poverty within the community. So by the time we get to the 1990s, Madison's already got an enormous drag in regards to the shared revenue formula. At that point, we went to the Thompson administration, which acknowledged the problem. And we combined with Milwaukee, and we had a successful effort to create the expenditure restraint program. And I can't remember what year that went into effect, sometime around 92, 93. Dave Schmidt can probably know the year better than I do. But at that point, those greater revenues were to make a difference. And nobody's fought the inequities of the shared revenue formula the way I have. I mean, back at that point, we were putting wanted posters of legislators up around the square in time for farmers markets and the art fair. When we get to 2011, right at the time of Act 10, we had a horrible situation, which was not just the result of Act 10, but of some foolishness conducted by the city. Because in the rush to get the labor contracts adopted, nobody put pencil to paper. Nobody knew what they were going to cost. And as we looked at what was going to happen for calendar year 2011 and 2012, that particular year, or those 2-year period, we were way over all of our expenditure limitations, and we didn't have the levy capacity or any capacity to deal with the problem. As a result, we sat down with the bargaining units, and you heard somebody here earlier talk about the county at that point having layoffs and what's it called, where people are cycling into 4-day work weeks? Furloughs. So we met with the unions and we made an agreement with them, and that's how we got out of that crisis. And the agreement was there'd be no layoffs or furloughs. In exchange, they would lose portion of the salary increases in the contracts that they had just signed, but we guaranteed that they would get them within another 2 years. Then we were all right for a couple of years, except when Emerald Ash Borer hit, and you heard Mark Clear describe the forestry fee. What had happened at that point, we had the remediation fee for the landfills, and we no longer needed all that revenue. So what I agreed to, which is not what happened, was we lowered the remediation fee, and the difference is made up with an increase in the forestry fee, specifically to cover Emerald Ash Borer. The City Council decided to go even further and raise the fee more than I'd agreed to. I couldn't stop because I didn't have enough votes to uphold the veto. At the same time, there were a couple of subsequent years where we didn't have a lot of problems, which included meeting with all the major healthcare providers. This is interesting because the city's in the state insurance pool, which controls what we're paying. But we met with all the healthcare providers and really kind of put the screws on them, saying we're going to go public with the costs here, the cost of premiums and the cost of coverage. And for the next 2 years, there were basically no increases in health insurance, and the budget crisis wasn't that great. However, all during that period, there was a running battle with the City Council. And it was one that I failed to win, as they met illegally in secret meetings at budget time to put together what they called omnibus amendments. And the debt service was just going out of control. But every year is different depending on, in most cases, external factors, though sometimes they're brought on by the city. But you can't play the game if you don't show up. somebody has got to go and work. You got to talk to Robin Voss. He and the Republicans have been raided here numerous times. You've got to go talk to him. You've got to go to the governor now while he's putting together the budget for next January, for next session. And you've got to talk to him about all those opportunities. He knows that Madison is critical to the state. He knows that Madison's critical to his own political base. And the Republicans are not going to have the kinds of majorities next year that they've had over the past decade. It's time for somebody to fight. But whether it's our own delegation or it's the governor, they're not going to fight if Madison doesn't show up.
I agree. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Figueroa Cole.
Sorry, thank you, Mayor. I have a question for oh my God, Rawls. I forgot. I'm sorry.
Dan Rawls.
Dan. Oh, your name, Dan. Can you talk a little bit about the changes on per capita employees over the past 10 years?
Sure. Thank you for that. Just to clarify, so I've said in front of this body several times, city employees have been asked to do more with less in my entire 20 years at the city.
Sorry?
In the last decade plus, the number of per capita employees that the city has dropped from 11.1 city employees per capita to almost 10.1, 10.0, depending on how you measure it. And what that really means is the city has continued to grow by leaps and bounds, and we continue to grow as staff a little bit, but there's always more work to do than there is staff. You've heard from some of the folks who are here and a few who have left tonight about the demands that's put on city staff for everything from library hours to trash pickup to homeless housing services to snow plowing, all of those things. So we are doing more with less and have done more with less for the last decade plus. Prior to Act 10, it was still happening and we were still being asked to do more with less, but it got supercharged after Act 10. As far as what we could do now to change that, going to the state, I don't know that I'd count on that, but what I do know, and what is not a question, is that the city has to pass a balanced budget right now. And going to the state and asking folks who have, let's be honest, for the last 10 plus years, kicked us in the shins every single time they've had an opportunity, seems like a risky bet from where I sit. Maybe they've changed tunes, maybe we can all sing Kumbaya, I love that song, but at the same time, I'd rather make certain, as a public servant, as a resident and a homeowner and a taxpayer in our city, that we've got a budget that provides those services, that deals with this deficit long term. Maybe there's a way moving forward. Who knows what the election will bring? Who knows what will happen next year? Apparently there's been some political hubbub on the national scene that might trickle down to the state and change how our election or how our legislature is dealt with and how they're structured right now. Maybe we get some changes there and maybe there's some rational decision making. But right now, we have to pass have to pass a balanced budget, and you have to fill that budget hole. And the most progressive way available is a referendum. Do I like it as a homeowner? Not a big fan, but I'd much rather put my money back into my community, back into my fellow employees, back into the folks who need it more than me, than trying to scrape everything off the bottom of our proverbial fiscal budget, trying to take things away from the folks who have the least, who can least afford those cuts, and frankly, seeing my fellow employees out of jobs because of layoffs. So that's a long-winded answer, but I appreciate the question.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you. I have no others in the queue for questions. Never fails. Alder Mayadze?
Oh, sorry, Mayor. Didn't mean to fail you, but I just have one more question for the speaker that just spoke.
Dan?
Yes, sir.
No, you talked about the shared revenue. I was just saying, did you get a chance to see, I believe it was David Crowley from Milwaukee, fight for shared revenue.
I don't recall that. I might have seen it, but I've seen so many budget presentations in the last few months that
The county executive in Milwaukee.
I have not seen that particular one that I can recall. So I do know that Milwaukee cut, for lack of a better term, cut a deal with the state where they got additional ability to raise sales tax revenue, but there were other strings attached to it as far as how they could spend it and other things about what they could do. We're not Milwaukee. With the greatest of respect to a great city, they were in a much different fiscal situation than we are. They were facing, I don't know if insolvency is the right word, but they were in much more dire straits than we are right now. We have a way to deal with our situation now. They didn't. And you know, they played their hand, as I understand it, the best that they could. I'm obviously not a state political operator, but they also were in such a dire strait that everybody, as one of the other speakers noted, a lot of folks from Milwaukee, city, county, and other entities went to the state and said, you have to help us out. You have to help us or we will be insolvent. Nobody wants to open up the State Journal or the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel and see the front page that says Milwaukee's bankrupt. Nobody wants to be the person who's in charge when that happens. So they, as I understand it, they cut this deal to give Milwaukee the ability to stave that off, and it works, as I understand it. I'm not into the Milwaukee political weeds, but it works. We are not Milwaukee. With, again, the greatest of respect to that city, we are in a different position. We can solve this problem. It's made worse by the state, but we can solve our problem. At the same time, if we're, as I said before, if we're going to go to the state and ask for relief, look at the deal that Milwaukee got and look at the essentially the price they had to pay. The way that I view it is they had to go hat in hand and maybe not beg for assistance, but darn close. We don't need to do that. And quite frankly, if we get relief from the legislature at some point, that'd be great. I would love to see that. But are you willing to count on that? I'm not. I'm not willing to count on the current makeup of the legislature changing enough betwixt now and November, when you have to adopt a budget, or even now and next year to make that big of a difference. I'd love to see it, I'll be honest with you, but it's not a bet that I would want to make, especially when we're talking about critical services to folks who need them. We're talking about jobs or layoffs here at the city. You know, to me, it's like playing roulette. You might win, you might, but you might also lose big. And from my perspective, this is our house that we're betting, our figurative community house. I'd much rather go back and find a way that we have control over, that we here in this room and here in the city have control over, as opposed to going someplace hat in hand and hoping that somebody will help us out. And especially when those folks haven't done that in the past.
I'm just saying that I wouldn't mind banding.
Alder, a question?
Yes. So when that time comes, do you mind if I band together with you brothers and sister union officials and see if we can talk to the state and do something about it? Do you mind if I band together?
Count on us being there.
All right, thank you.
I don't think there's any question that we would love to be there to be part of the conversation, to have some input about how to solve this problem, because it's not just our problem or our solution, it's all of ours.
Yeah. All right, that concludes my question.
Thank you, Alder.
Thanks.
Is that good?
Alder Latimer Burris?
Oh, yeah, I had a couple of questions for Mary Batari.
I don't think she's here anymore.
Okay, then can I ask a couple of questions of Mark Clear, please?
You're not going to ask me to explain the expenditure restraint program, are you?
No, but I am
It's been a few years.
I am going to ask you a few things. I've just been trying to study and just, get a variety of opinions as we're making a big decision that certainly should not be political because it's involving people's lives, in particular the staff. When you talked about, let me just get my notes right here. I had you in front of me. The fare system and the different time periods that was happening. So there was pre-2011, and then there was, the act that everybody was down there protesting. Pre-2011, as I understand it, I'm setting up the question, Mayor. Pre-2011, I understand it was a fair system. And post-2011, it was not. Is there a reason that we get smaller percentage other than that the state legislature hates us and wants to crush us? Maybe that's a valid case. Nobody's there. I was down there for the act protesting, but is there a reason that other cities get more than us besides they hate us?
Well, I think part of the reason has to do with the formula itself and, frankly, Madison's success at being high growth. The formula works against us in ways that then end up making it more difficult for us to keep that shared revenue from the state and makes us more subject to the expenditure restraint program because we're required to only raise revenue within the net new construction. And even though we have a lot of growth in the city, as a percentage of the city, it's still relatively small. And so it doesn't give us enough headroom to really raise the revenue to keep up with the kinds of expenditures that we need. Is that?
Yeah, so I'm trying to understand, is that like we are doing it better, we have more resources, so we get less, it's kind of like, people complain about, people are getting assistance, but, people that need assistance more, it's kind of an equalizer. Is that the same thing with the other cities? It's more of an equalizer where, if I'm living in a farming community and I don't get as much, my city would totally go under, wouldn't have police force, or is it just strictly politics? I'm just trying to get the clear, real answer that's transparent.
I think, and this is my opinion, but I think it's some of both. I think the legislature does have the intention of helping cities that need it more. And so because of Madison's growth, we don't benefit as much from that formula. And I think there's certainly an element to the fact that because that punishes us, I believe there are people in the legislature that appreciate that aspect of it, let's say.
Okay, and then my other question was about, thank you. My other question was, from your opinion, it seems like, us alders we're just getting, learning this for the, first time in January, February, where we were asked to lay out our values, of what people wanted to have cut. And many of us thought, across the aisles, different types of alders thought, well, we have to have more information. We just can't have a 4-hour meeting and count it as a deep dive. But if you were looking, when you analyze it, I don't know if you spend your time analyzing it or not, but what would be, why did we have, maybe 2 to 3 million, 6 to 7 million, and now we just got hit with what started out as 27 million? Why that jump? I'm trying to get down to the answer that's nonpartisan, non-side, just, the truth.
I have less expertise on that question than your own finance staff. But as I understand it, that, there were two things. One is there has been this incremental increase, this squeezing over the years, and that the things that COVID created, both in terms of the additional costs and then the one or several times, but not forever, revenue that came in from the feds and from the state to help mitigate some of those, really exacerbated that problem. That probably we would be here either way. It may not be as significant today if COVID hadn't happened. It's hard to speculate on that, but that definitely accelerated the process. You know, maybe it would be 2 or 3 more years before it would be this bad, if not for COVID, but it would happen eventually.
And then, thank you.
Dave is not raising his hand and saying, you know, totally wrong, so maybe he will later.
He's done a lot of meetings. We thank him for that. And then just kind of, because you were here for so long, you know, you said 2007, 2018, so, 11 years. This business of, it seems to me like when I read stuff and talk to people and whatnot, that like we're just already 10% understaffed and, we're holding positions open. I mean, what's the impact of that?
Well, I think the impact of that you heard from some of your own staff. It's people working more. It's people, working harder, trying to do several different jobs at the same time. I mean, I think that that the city staff of Madison work hard. They have a strong commitment to customer service and to really get things done. But at the end of the day, there's only so many hours in the day. There's only so many miles you can drive in a bucket truck to take care of tree limbs and all the other things and some of those things, the level of service that we have, can't keep up with the growth in the needs.
And I'm sure as an outside perspective, but yet having been on council, going is like, so when you said we were, and it just dawned on me, I just heard what you said, that we were going to face this anyway, this deficit, this looming deficit. I have a 2-part question is why, and then what are we going to do as I've been reading and understanding and talking to people that after five years, we're going to be back in the same place. So my 2-part, did you catch my 2 questions there?
I think so. I mean, I'll answer the second part first because then I'm going to forget the first part and ask you to repeat it. But I think that even the kind of referendum that you're looking at, it's not a permanent solution. And so at some point in the future, several years, maybe it'll go 7 or 8 years, you're going to be asking the taxpayers for another referendum. I mean, the problem of not being those constraints that you have, that's not going away. You can't just referendum that problem away. So,
Okay.
I'm sorry, what was the first?
And so it just went to back to what you said is that we knew as a city, and maybe we even knew as a city all the way back, but we knew as a city that we were going to hit this, massive roadblock that's that you often hear on a national level that people are $30 million short. So I'm just wondering the factors that you felt like got us there, besides the state legislature, and they don't give us enough money.
I think what you're asking is, do we know that we were kicking cans down the road and that there would be some explosion later?
Yeah.
I think that the answer is yes to some extent, and yet I feel like there wasn't necessarily anything that we could have done differently to prevent that.
Okay. And so in your experience, you guys in up through 2018, I mean, I'm talking for Sminicki. He loves the bond rating, and he would tape himself to the door so that we never go below AAA. And I'm just trying to get at how we got here for the public of how. Yeah.
It would be very bad.
Yeah, and how we got here. Do we understand this, and what are other options? And then I wanted to ask you about this surplus that we found out in 2013, and I understand it's going to happen in 2014 a little bit. And then our rainy day fund, and it increasing it quite a bit. In your opinion, why is it that we could or could not just simply apply the rainy day fund to the situation and have it where it went down the road a little bit, and we as a council can continue to ask questions, get educated, and really get to the answer and whatnot? Because I certainly don't want to make a decision that's, based on pressure, and I'm actually quite upset that we're putting the staff up against the referendum when I already know they're 10% short, and I look at some of the colleagues in the room and they could be gone. That's feels to me that feels to me to be totally irresponsible.
So, my understanding in looking at the rainy day fund is, first of all, yes, you need that backstop to maintain the bond rating, but also you can kind of think of it as one-time money. And that if you start to raid that, not only do you potentially erode that bond rating, but eventually it's gone. And then you got nothing. And then the problems that were created and that you patched over are just exacerbated whenever that happens.
So it sounds like we probably need to look for different solutions long-term, maybe.
I would say that's true, yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Maybe I should stay up.
Thank you, Alder. We do have one other Alder in the queue.
I did have a couple other questions, but sure, let them go and I'll come back.
Alder Harrington McKinney, was it for Alder Clear?
Yes, it is for Alder Clear, former Alder.
Go ahead, Alder.
I'm
sorry, I can't keep but call him Alder.
Water this time.
Okay, Mark, I have a very strong group in District 20, and they support strong towns, and they talk about a term that you just threw out, and you said net new construction. So you put that out, and so what I'm going to circle back and ask, why did you identify net new constructions in our conversation tonight? That completes my question.
I'm not completely sure I understand your question, Alder, but net new construction is the amount of growth in the city's tax base from year to year, and the expenditure restraint program is based on that number. I'm sorry?
Okay, my question
yes,
was
the levy limit, not the expenditure restraint.
Introduced it. You introduced it, and I thought that there was a reason for you to introduce that term. That's why I called it back.
Yeah, it was in response to a question, which I've now forgotten. Sorry.
Okay, no worries. I'm complete.
Thank you, Alder.
Thank you.
Alder Latimer Burris.
Oh, yes, if I could ask, just a second, if I could ask, let me take a look at my notes. I have like 7 pages of notes here, so just a second. Oh, Rick, if I could talk to Rick?
Rick Marks?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, and thank you for your advocacy. And I know that we as a council don't want to cut employees at all. I'm so sorry that the city's in that position. So I was wondering that, and I know that you don't speak for everybody, but just as one of the leaders and founding president, as you said, I asked you the same question about like other alternatives. Surplus funds. It seems like the city council office, our chief of staff Karen called for 5 public meetings when we realized that we were going to be making a decision on something that's very serious, that has long-term impacts, and we don't even know some of the terms that we're voting on. It's that bad. And we got educated. Now we're a little bit educated. We're dangerously educated, and we're eager to find solutions that long-term for the city that we want to have, that everybody wants to have. And depending on where you're at, you may want environment, you may want housing, you may want all these different things. It seems to me when I analyze it is that it's going to be very expensive, really expensive. We almost need 2 to 3 times what we're asking. So what's your position on just spending the funds to solve the problem and then getting more education? And maybe by that time we will have a legislature that will at least consider it. I'm under no delusion that it will be done in a year, but I'm just trying to get a straight answer, because I don't want to put pressure on staff to answer questions when they're going to be looking at their jobs too. So since you're not looking at your job and you've been here.
Yeah, you're talking about the contingency fund for one. That's one-time money. I think Mark had mentioned that. That's something that certainly is supposed to be meant for those rainy days, those emergencies. We've had rainy days and emergencies every year. And so I do hesitate on trying to solve a long-term problem with anything that would be one-time money. I think also it was mentioned that in the past, we've had money coming one time from different sources that allowed us to patch over these things, which only then exacerbates that problem going forward. It makes it larger. The interest rates, cost of living and stuff like that don't slow down. Another source that we've used in the past, the one that is the most awful source for me, is the idea that those folks that have been stripped of their rights back in 2011 have been given the opportunity then to not keep up with the wages and benefits of other employees that have maintained their rights. And that's one way that we have worked in collaboration to be able to try and maintain our not having to furlough and lay off and use those kinds of terms. We can't see other sources. Another one that was brought up tonight is all of those special fees. Those have proven to be more regressive in general than what we would consider the property tax fee to be. I do like the idea of a lot of the city properties that are owned by the state of Wisconsin, for instance, and other types of organizations that otherwise would be tax exempt, be able to maintain some of those fees. Maybe there's a way to be able to change that, modify that version of it. But we're talking again about small amounts of money. And the real structural issue is going to come back very quickly. And I think that one of the things that the mayor has done in this current proposal is address the extra money that is in that contingency fund in a way to try to slow down the, again, increasing requirements for fees going forward. And I think there's other folks that would be concerned that we might have another referendum coming up once we had a referendum that got passed. I think that's one of the things that we don't want to see happen ever again. And in order to be able to make that happen, we have to start thinking in a more 5-year basis so that we can find funds that create a curve downwards in that long-term structural debt. And you're right, getting those state aids turned around will help with that, but it doesn't help with the current issues that we have now. So being able to pull together, we're more than happy to support any version of a referendum that the mayor and alders have come up with that, again, support the idea of maintaining parity in wages with our current employees that we have. If you start changing that or deciding that you're going to cut some jobs, even when it seems like a few jobs, you can't imagine the amount of strife that that causes in departments. It's going to be very difficult for people to maintain their ability to do twice as much work, because that's also what's going to happen. We're going to have to suffer through going through a lot of vacancies going forward, just like we have in the past, in order to try and maintain current employment. And because of that, you now are going to have people that are going to not only have to do twice as much work, but they're going to have to do it for less money. And so that includes people that are going to find other places. As you heard tonight too, that means that we have employees that are, for the first time in a long time, finding other opportunities outside of city employment that do better with wages and benefits. That's shameful. And I think that we need to make sure that we put a stop to a process that patches things over.
And just to clarify two things right quick. One, I wanted to ask you about the wages, wage parity, just so we have it correctly and it's on the record. Like the city employees held off, like they were going to get I thought before I ran for office, I had talked to somebody that was, within the unions, and they were explaining that certain departments didn't get a raise. I mean, like 2019, maybe it's 2018, whatever years it was, 2019, 2020, where we held off, we gave police, and then we didn't do the other employees, and it's like a demand, people are not asking for excess just for excess. It's that they gave up some wages previously, or, increases. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. We certainly have seen, I know the number of $6 million in the, just in, I believe, the 2022 budget, where we were that was the equal of the money of the shortfall between the difference in what the folks that were not represented by unions and those folks that were represented by unions. And just recently this year, we've been able to catch up with and achieve parity with all of those other groups. And we're thankful for that, but we just got here after a decade of doing that, and now we're talking about potentially making changes so that we would be immediately behind on that again. And we have to find a way to not use the system that we have now that's been forced upon us again by the state through the acts that occurred 15 years ago, and find other ways to be able to fund that. And at the same time, I am excited about the electoral process this fall, and I'm very hopeful that we're going to have some significant changes and that we will be able to address some of our long-term issues electorally.
Okay, and just so I want to make this statement, but I want you to correct me if I'm wrong, that it was, the difference is that the police and firefighters, they kept their unions and now they put some special things in. If we do cutting, they cut us. And that's the reason they were able to get their raises and everybody else had to wait. Am I simplifying that?
That is true, as well as Madison Metro also has the ability to collectively bargain. And there are a few other organizations that have different rights to be able to collectively bargain. The fire department, I believe, cannot bargain for wages, but they can bargain for our benefits or for the insurance. Right, so there's a lot of different moving parts in there, but essentially, they're the ones that are able to bargain and have us agree to something under contract in advance, knowing that when you're going to set a budget, this is the number that you must actually achieve. On the other hand, for the rest of the employees who lost those rights, there is no absolute guarantee that if you don't have the money, that you're going to be forced to actually pay us under contract. We don't have one. So it does have the ability for you to be able to become inequitable and not be equal with your pay. And that has happened in the past in order, in some cases, for us to save jobs. And so we're now back in that same position again.
Okay, thank you so much. And then I had a question, wanted to move on over to the city properties owned by the city. Now that solution, I haven't delved into. I feel like all these are individual solutions.
Well, there is this a
Yeah, it's a
question
question.
for
I'm
Rick?
setting up the question, if you don't mind. I set it up so you can understand.
Just making sure that it's for him as well.
Yeah. So we have different buckets that we're all getting to learn, like, shared revenue, salary savings. I can finally say it after like 4 months of study. And there's a name for something that you're talking about with the city properties owned by the city where we would get more funds. But that's something that's whatever that's called, that's something that takes a while. It's not something that we could just petition tomorrow and we receive it.
Alder, are you talking about municipal services payments from the state?
I said whatever it's called, Mayor. So obviously
But you
I don't
said
know what it was.
city payments for city properties, so I'm unclear.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I say that? State payments for city properties. Is that what you said? You were
Correct.
talking? Okay. So all of us don't know about that and necessarily. And granted, we have, now, let me just set this up so there's no issue here. We get a lot of stuff to read. We have a lot of videos. And when I go through it pretty intensely. So I haven't read everything as it changes in the last 5 minutes or the last 2 hours or the last week or whoever had privilege to the information. When I get it, I read it, I process it, I ask questions. You can see that. So with the state giving the city payments for properties that the state is benefiting from and we're taking care of, that's increasing those. That would take time, right?
Yes, I don't even know if it's technically legal, let's put it that way. I'm just saying that, again, and this was brought up actually by Alder Verveer at one of the last meetings, feeling that when we're talking about whether or not the idea of what is the most progressive way of being able to gain this revenue, one of the things that was brought up, even though we do believe that special fees are entirely regressive in almost every case, the one special case where these special fees that are given to all property owners in the city of Madison would be those properties that are owned by tax-exempt individuals who may not have to pay property tax, so that if we were to charge higher property tax, those folks would, in essence, not see an increase. So in order to find some way for that small amount of revenue, which I don't know the amount, it's just, again, another potential small source, not something that I believe would be, again, a way of being able to eliminate or reduce the referendum need.
Okay, so then when I consider all of that, if we were to distill your arguments about the referendum, of why now, it's like basically we're out of time. There's not a time to fix the problem, to go through on an intellectual level, to look at every aspect for all of us to get the right information to bring everybody up to speed, because November's on its way and this problem is right now. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Alder.
See?
You have additional questions, Alder?
Yes, I think I did. Let me just make sure, because actually, they might have cleared most of, if I could just ask Mayor Soglin to just talk about, I want to ask questions that you mentioned for possibilities, and I wanted to just get more information on that. So in your statement, you had said something about, and you might have finished. No, actually, I'm not sure if you did finish or not, but you were talking about 4 possibilities that we could do as a city to address
Yes.
the problem.
All right. What I'd like to do, since you like to set things up, is I'd like to first set up what are our possibilities under the shared revenue program. And I really rely on Dave Schmidtke to go over this. My recollection is that shared revenue was set up with a legacy coming back to the progressive era and Bob LaFollette. The state collects, at that point, the income tax. Later comes the sales tax when Gaylord Nelson becomes governor. And the idea is you share that money. You don't leave it with the wealthiest communities that can then put that money into infrastructure, making for a better community, leaving the poor communities poor, but you redistribute it. So we come up with the shared revenue formula in the mid-1970s. And Dave, am I correct? The formula itself has not been changed. All of the reductions for Madison are based on the formula. Is that right? Was the formula changed? The formula is frozen. So,
Yep.
all right, but I think you have to ask Dave about the history of the formula, because I can't remember all the details. I do know at some point a hold harmless was put in, particularly to help Madison, so that the drastic cuts weren't as great each year. Now, I see 4 opportunities. And the reason I'm focusing on shared revenue is because if you compare shared revenue to the municipal payments, if I remember correctly, Madison gets 45% of what's in the municipal payments fund. So if you were to add $10 million, for the state to add $10 million to that fund, Madison would get $4.5 million. Add $20 million to that fund, Madison would get $9 million, and so on. I don't know how much money the state would have to put into the shared revenue formula to get Madison another $9 million, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was in the hundreds of millions of dollars. So I guess what I'm suggesting is do what's the easiest lift, not that it's easy, but fixing the state's inadequate funding of the municipal services fund is going to be an easier lift than trying to fix shared revenue. Second possibility and third possibility are sales taxes. Milwaukee's transit system is funded by a sales tax. It's fairly common to have a regional transit system around this country funded by a sales tax. Milwaukee now has a sales tax separate from its transit system. So that's another possibility. And I can't remember in which city document I read this, but I seem to recall that in one of the city documents, the point was made that it's actually more productive for a city to have a revenue from a sales tax than a property tax, because when the economy improves, you get a greater lift from a sales tax than you do from a property tax. There's a lot of other things I'd suggest you do. I mean, you heard all kinds of anecdotes here tonight. anecdotes about city salaries and competitive nature of the private sector. I don't know what the truth is, and I don't think anybody here does. But if you're going to hear those kind of arguments, I think you've got to go and do an analysis of the base pay 10, 12 years ago for public employees before Act 10 was enacted, comparable to the equivalent jobs in the private sector, and see where they're at today. That's the only way of doing it. You heard somebody speak about his friend who bought a house for $300,000 or something, and the property tax impact of the referendum is $15 a month. I seem to recall in one of the city documents that the impact of the referendum on a renter is going to be $200 a year. Math I've seen in terms of a half-cent sales tax is that for a household that has a $50,000 a year income, the impact is $50 a year, not $200. I think all that's got to be analyzed, but the point is, the fear-mongering about Milwaukee and what was demanded of Milwaukee, and Milwaukee had to face bankruptcy and all that other stuff, has got to be put in context of what you can do to avoid the referendum, which is going to be on top of the city's ability to go to the maximum on the levy anyway. I don't have the access to the data that I'd like to have, but there's $16 million left over that's already been assigned to close the $22 million gap. That means the gap is $6 million. Now, I don't know what was budgeted in 2023's budget and 2024's budget for investment income. I don't know what the projections are for 2024 on investment income compared to reality. But the Fed, as of now and through September, has not lowered prime. It has not lowered its rates, which affects prime. So it's very possible that the city is going to have a $6 million surplus beyond what was budgeted for 2024. $6 million plus $16 million is $22 million. You've solved it for 1 year, and I acknowledge that's only for 1 year. But it gives you then all of next year's budget deliberations at the state with a vastly improved governor and a vastly improved legislature. And I think that the chance of getting something adopted, if a good faith effort is made, compared to the damage equitably, what's being done to the people of this city in terms of the tax burden, is just something that should not be passed up.
So if I could ask you then to, just as I asked the other two speakers, well, let's just first on that question with the, I think it's the municipal payment and sales tax that you were talking about. Again, those are not, that's not something that we could just do like in the next 30 to 60 days. And in other words, how long does that typically take to?
You would need enabling legislation from the state. Look, you get your $16 million. You then find another $6 million, which might be just 1 year funds, but it gets you through next year. And I'm not saying, let's put it this way, do that, and if the state fails to make any of these changes that I think the city should be lobbying for, yes, you will be confronted with the referendum in another year. There's no question about it. But you can raise that 22 million. Now, what has the legislature got to do? Or let me answer you this way. The legislature would have to act on these variations, which I believe have to come out of the governor's budget. It has to start with the governor's budget, has to be put in there. That means talking to the governor before January 1st, before he submits his budget, and then the battle is engaged to keep it in the budget and make it not too onerous for the city.
And
There's
then,
been statements that a sales tax would not be effective until 2027. And I know what that's based on. It's based on Robin Voss's position from years ago that if the state authorized an RTA or a city to have a sales tax, he would require that there be a public referendum. So you then have the legislature act next year, there would have to be a referendum in 26, and so you wouldn't have the benefit of that until 27. Well, has anybody talked to Robin Voss? Has anybody seen what would happen if Robin Voss was collided with a firm position by Dane County legislators, other friends in the legislature, and the governor, rather than just speculating on what would happen?
but you're saying that we'd have to have a referendum no matter what.
No, we wouldn't have to have a referendum. The referendum was, excuse me, are you talking about referendum on the sales tax?
Yeah, so we'd have to have some type of referendum.
No, you don't have to have a referendum on sales tax. The premise is Robin Voss would demand it and be successful in demanding it. That's where that comes from.
Okay. I have one more question. Let me just find it. I wrote it here. Then also, I want to ask you this last question, the same question I asked the other two speakers, and that is the question I keep asking, and my colleagues know this, is why can't we use the surplus that we have, whatever amount it is, apply it to the problem to give us more time to move forward? That's one part of the question. Second part of the question is, when do you typically, as mayor, learn about the surplus? Is it usually in the middle of May or?
All right. All right, in terms of the surplus, my recollection is learning about the surplus usually came as part of learning about something else, which is the reconciliation of the previous year's finances. So in other words, there may be a whole lot of things that have to be reconciled. Was it a bad year for snow and streets went to $500,000 over? Was it a bad year for fuel and $500,000 there? It's all part of the reconciliation of the overages and the underages. In terms of the biggest element that you experienced this last year, you're dependent upon when that's reported by the state, because the state has the city's investments, I believe, are still principally in the state investment pool. So you'd have to have a report from the state. And again, you got to ask these questions of Dave Schmidtke. I'm not up to date, but my recollection is that usually all this information was combined and comes out sometime late March, early April.
Okay. And then as far as the shared revenue, asking you the same questions that I asked the other two speakers on the shared revenue, I'm not calling it the right thing, but the 2023 money, unexpected money, and the potential for unexpected money in 2024 that's different from
All right.
other.
My understanding of what happened with shared revenue is the state increased by a significant amount of money what was available in the shared revenue pool to be divided among all the municipalities in the state. That because of the formula, it had a minimal impact on Madison. Because that formula is population, poverty, and the tax base. And Madison continues to have a growing tax base that outstrips any factor for poverty that should be growing in the city.
I'm sorry, Mayor, I was talking about, and I don't know what the name of it is, and maybe the mayor can help me, Mayor Sati can help me figure out what that name is, but it's the 22 million that we had. So we had a $27 million deficit, and then in the newspaper, at some point, we all learned.
The Alder is talking about the use of the general fund balance.
Oh, yes, the general fund balance. Thank you. There's so many. I mean, we have so much going on in finance. It's amazing. So I asked the other two speakers about the use of the fund balance. Why can't we just take the 22 million, apply it against the 22 million, or if it's not quite 22 million, let's say it gets down to 16 million. Why can't we just take the money from our rainy day fund?
Well, you
The
can take
fund
the
balance.
16 million. The 16 million in effect is legitimate as a one-time expenditure because you're not taking it out of the rainy day fund. But that is most likely only a 1 to 2 year source of additional income because interest rates are probably going to go down over the next 15 months, starting in September.
So why couldn't we just take that money and delay this decision until
That's what I'm,
next
well,
year?
that's what I'm saying, is you take that 16 million, you find other ways of finding 6 million more, you delay the decision on the referendum, and I think in terms of leadership, in terms of will, the benefits of waiting a year to try and use any of those 4 opportunities with the state is worthwhile compared to the onerous burden of the referendum being passed.
And finally, in your opinion, would that, and ultimately, I will ask Director Schmidtke this question, but and I have not asked him this question yet, but in your opinion, would that affect our AAA bond rating? Is it something that we could legally do? I mean, what's the negative to using the money that we weren't expecting when we were going to address the
You do it for
27
1 year,
million?
there's not going to be any downside. There won't be any downside for 1 year, especially,
It's not fiscally irresponsible?
if you had to go to the rainy day fund, I would describe it as being irresponsible, but on a ledger of what's been done over the last 5 years, it fits in with everything else. And so for 1 more year, doing it, given the upside of the reward of not imposing that additional 22 million on the taxpayers, on the renters, on the homeowners, would make it worthwhile.
And haven't we used the rainy day fund in the past few years, every single year?
I can't speak to that. I just recall it being done a couple of times. I don't know how often it was done.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. No other alders in the queue with questions. So that will conclude public comment. And we'll move on. On item 68, which is Legistar 84443, authorizing the scheduling of a referendum related to exceeding the municipal property tax limits in the city of Madison. President Figueroa Cole, a motion, please.
Move to refer to the 20 council, common council special meeting, please.
Second.
Moved and seconded to refer to the 8/20 Common Council meeting.
Common council special meeting.
Special meeting. Moved and seconded. Is there discussion on referral? Seeing none, is there any objection to recording a unanimous vote in favor of referral? Seeing no objection, we'll record that unanimous vote. And that takes us to item 69, which is Legistar 84572, the Chief of Police second quarter report from Chief Sean Barnes. On item 69, President Figueroa Cole.
Move to accept, maybe?
Second.
Moved and seconded to accept the report. Are there questions of staff? Seeing none, is there discussion? Seeing none, is there any objection to recording unanimous vote in favor of accepting item 69? Seeing no objection, we'll record that unanimous vote. That will take us to the end of our agenda. Are there any additional introductions from the floor? Seeing none, are there announcements? Seeing none, Alder Govindarajan.
There are cheese and crackers in the back. Please take them. I don't want to take them home. Thank you.
Anybody would like to take food home, please do. Seeing no additional announcements, Alder Knox, it is your turn. Alder Knox?
I would happily move for adjournment.
Second.
Moved and seconded to adjourn. Is there any objection to recording unanimous vote in favor of adjournment? Seeing no objection, we are adjourned.